check, check, check. Let's try that again. Take two. Okay. Welcome to the Dana Point City Council meeting of January 17, 2017. We're now reconvening our meeting from the closed session. So, Mr. Munoz, do we have anything to report from the closed session?
Madam Mayor, there were no reportable items from the closed session this evening.
Great. Okay, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Vizor, could you please lead us?
Please rise, face the colors, place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remain standing. We have an invocation provided by Chaplain Maury Hansen from VFW Post 9334. Mr. Hansen.
And cover, please. Dear God, we come together to bow our heads and open this city council meeting in a joyful occasion and with a lot of happiness and a lot of aspirations in our lives. We ask that you would bless our speakers here today, especially our mayor, our city council staff, and all the police and all the other participants that are going to be involved. May we grasp those things that you want us to understand, and may our hearts always be ready to respond to you and to whatever is asked of us as citizens. And we ask for you to provide us wisdom. And we ask for these things in your name. Amen. Amen.
Okay, we have a couple presentations here. First is our Business of the Month, and I am personally happy and privileged to present Kenny's Music Store. If you would please come up. All right, so I'm told that we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation, so you can stand right there and be the center of attention while we do that.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis and members of the council. I am pleased to announce the business of the month for January 2017 is Kenny's Music. Tonight we are joined by owners Kenny and Kimberly Williams. Since he was a kid, Kenny loved music. Kenny found fame as he toured the world in the 80s with a heavy metal band until 1993. When he got home from that last time on tour, he decided he needed to be done touring and settle down. Kenny started teaching lessons in his home with 14 students and kept growing year after year. And his business became so popular, it was too large to operate out of his home. Being a one-man show, Kenny started carrying guitar picks and necessities and decided to become more than a teacher, but also a store, and learned by trial and error. Finally, the perfect spot opened up for Kenny to have a larger shop, which is where Kenny's Music still sits today. Kenny's Music likes to say they're the barbershop of music stores, where neighbors and friends can congregate and talk, as well as have some impromptu jam sessions. Labeling themselves as the biggest little store in Orange County, you are sure to find everything to cover your musical needs, and if they don't have it, they can get it. With top-of-the-line teachers who have played all around the world and who can get you where you want to go, whether it be a casual player or a pro. Something that sets Kenny's Music apart from other music stores is that if you need someone to play a gig for you, they know where to find them. Receiving many accolades, Kenny's Music has been honored as National Association of Music Merchants' Top 100 Stores for 3 years in a row, as well as being named one of OC Weekly's Top 5 Music Stores in Orange County. Giving back to the community is a big part of Kenny's Music. Most recently, they were a big supporter of Game Changer, a charity that supports children with life-threatening illnesses. They have also helped support benefit concerts for Children's Hospital of Orange County and given many donations to the local schools. They participate with other musicians in benefit concerts when asked. So on behalf of the City Council, we'd like to congratulate you for being selected as Business of the Month for January, and we wish you many more years of continued success.
Okay, now. I just want you to know that I take my piano lessons from there, so. So I know how great these people are.
She's a good student, too.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Okay. So I want to present you with a certificate of recognition for Kenny's Music Store as our featured business of the month. Thank you.
I just want to say just one little thing. 24 years ago, I got off the road and I was looking for the prettiest and nicest place I could land because I knew that would be where I would land. So I went to San Diego. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I saw a great opportunity when I came to Dana Point. Not only did it fit what I wanted to settle into, and that's the beauty and the kind of people I wanted to be around, but it also didn't have a music store. So I thought, this is perfect. So yes, I did teach out of my home, but the part she left out is my girlfriend kicked me out. And so
wasn't me.
it wasn't her. She came along later, and we almost didn't get together because I didn't think I needed another rep in my life. And she talked on the phone and tried to sell me something.
Guitars.
And I said, well, I don't need you. I've already got somebody that sells me that stuff. And she, as good a salesperson as she is, she's really the reason why Kenny's Music has survived all these years. Because you walk in and you feel like you're in our house, and you feel like if I don't leave with something, these people are going to like feel bad, you know. So if you're going to leave with at least a pick or something, even if we give it to you, which we've done quite a bit of that too. So just over the years, we have grown to love Dana Point, and we wouldn't trade the experience we've had for the last, for us, last 15 years or so. And for me, 24 years, I wouldn't trade one moment of it for any place else in the world, actually. And I could have gone anywhere, actually. I actually had some money at the time. But we're really, really happy, and we're very, very honored that, once again, that you've honored us with this award. I think we won the last one was in 2001. So this is great to have another one to hang on the wall, and it's always nice to be recognized for something that you love.
I just want to say one thing, and that is that I really appreciate our city council. They think they do an excellent job. And I'm really happy with the addition of Paul and Deborah. I think they're going to be an excellent addition to our city council. And I want to thank you all. I love Dana Point. It's my home forever. I never want to leave it. And we're very appreciative and grateful. Thank you.
Okay, now wait a minute. If you don't leave with a pin, I'm going to feel bad. And then we also have a presentation from the Chamber of Commerce for you. This is Heather.
I'll make it quick because everyone already said the nice things about you guys. There have been chamber members for years. I have to say, when I first started, you guys took me under a wing and told me where all the bodies were buried, and I appreciate that. You guys really are what makes Dana Point so special. So congratulations, it's well deserved. And thank you, Mayor, for allowing the chamber to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Senior Vice Commander Wayne Yost. This will teach me to come up without my glasses. From the VFW Post 9934, giving an award for Voice of Democracy to Jason Khalili. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, congratulations, City Council, City staff. I want to welcome you to 2016 City Council meeting. We want to also thank you for being such a great partner with the Dana Point Veterans of Foreign Wars, and we look forward to another successful year. At this time, I'm going to ask Jason Khalili to come forward. Each year, the Dana Point Veterans of Foreign Wars sponsors a series of patriotic essay contests. One is designed for middle school students, and one is designed for high school students. We're going to have Jason recite his essay this year. He was our first place winner at our post level. And I just wanted to stress, as I have in the years past, that these patriotic essay contests are really important to the thread of our community. This is what helps these students ground themselves in what their vision of America is and what their hopes for their future in America is. We literally this year had about 40 different applicants in our series of essay contests, and the point differential and the grading was all in single digits between the first place through the last place. So every one of them certainly deserved a high ranking, but Jason's actually stood out to be excellent, above our expectations. So Jason, I'm going to have you recite your essay, if you would, please.
Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. John F. Kennedy. As a citizen in a democratic society, I am deeply grateful for my civic rights, but also cognizant of the fact that my rights come with civic responsibilities. My convictions stem from the fact that both of my parents are immigrants. My mother fled her native country after a bullet pierced her bedroom wall and landed just 3 inches from her head. She started her life in America by working at a hair salon for minimum wage. My father fled his native country with his mother and younger sister after his 13-year-old cousin had just been shot at the border and died in her mother's arms. At the age of 15, my father became the head of his household in a rented low-income housing unit in Atlanta, Georgia. His father could not escape the country with them. Although my father was poor, jobless, and friendless, he was thrilled to be living in a democratic society where he had the freedom to work hard to make a better life. He used his entrepreneurial spirit to buy cheap cars, repair them, and then resell them for profit. When I asked my parents about their stories, what really touched me was the fact that they were almost exactly my current age when they were forced to flee their native country and assimilate to a completely different culture. My parents raised me to be a good citizen and to be grateful for all that a democracy has to offer. I made it my responsibility to learn the principles of the Declaration of Independence and to better understand the Constitution and how it works to protect liberty. I developed a strong work ethic and believed that it was my social responsibility to make my community a better place. I followed my father's entrepreneurial spirit and created a business that would be of service to lower-income families while providing a viable income for me and a way to help out with family expenses. I firmly believe that it is my responsibility to help the oppressed in America, those who do not have a voice, immigrants like my parents who struggled just to put food on the table, and who are often gauged by slum landlords who do not provide safe housing. I saved money to buy a drone and taught myself to maneuver it to try and capture dangerous roof ponding and other anomalies that existed due to clogged gutters and poor maintenance on part of the property managers. The apartment buildings I serviced were rented to low-income households located in Santa Ana, Orange, Costa Mesa, and Garden Grove. My parents' journey also inspired me to do more than just reading about democracy, how the government works, and what my responsibility to America is. I made it my responsibility to implement civic programs and participate in organizations that make a difference. My sister and I started a chapter of Youth Court at our high school. Youth Court is a community solution for embracing at-risk youth A juvenile charged with an offense has the opportunity to forego the hearing and sentencing procedures of the court and instead attend a court held at my high school. Youth courts are youth-driven and designed and operated to empower youth. A judge and youth defendants play a variety of roles in the judicial process. If the teen who is charged with the crime accepts to participate in youth court, their crime is completely wiped off their criminal record. I really see the value in this program because it gives young people a second chance to get their life back on the right track. Statistics prove that youth courts have a higher success rate in rehabilitating young people than the juvenile system does. America is the land of second chances. My responsibility is to help turn at-risk youth into good citizens. I am also involved in the Youth in Government program. Youth in Government is a simulation of our government's democratic process. It involves over 2,500 high school students from California. Over the course of 5 months, we participate in weekly meetings and 2 weekend conferences in Sacramento. At the conferences, we elect officers and train in a specific program area. I lead the program area bench trial. Within this program, I work with students from all around California who come to learn about the government because they believe that they can better it. Youth in Government gave me an even bigger picture of the intricacies of government and democracy. Democracy must be learned by each generation. This quote is attributed to Dr. Earl T. Hawkins, the founder of the Maryland Youth in Government program. My responsibility to America will continue as I plan to become a constitutional lawyer or work in the field of social entrepreneurship. I have accepted President Kennedy's challenge to accept my own responsibility for the future of this great country. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that if Jason is an example of what his peers are going to be putting forward from this point forward, that our country is in really good hands. Mayor, if I may have your permission, this time I'd like to invite Jason's families as well as our comrades and the veterans of foreign wars to come forward to make the presentations. Jason, on behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Dana Point, Post 9934, and Our Ladies Auxiliary, we'd like to make this presentation to you for being the first place winner in our Voice of Democracy essay contest. In addition to that, we give you this medallion and this ribbon and a check for $300. Don't let them get a hold of it. And we congratulate you for your patriotism. Thank you.
Jason, that was very inspiring. We're very proud of you and your kids, and thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. We also have a presentation for you, a certificate of recognition presented by the City Council to you. Thank you. Thank you again. Up here for you, so if you'd please let me give those to you on the way out. Just one announcement before we keep going. Item number 12 has been pulled from the agenda, so if anyone is here to speak on that, that we are not having that item on the agenda tonight. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine, and they will be enacted by one roll call vote. There is no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the City Council, the staff, or the public requests that these items be removed. So I ask at this time, does any member of the City Council want to remove an item from the consent calendar?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to remove item number 6.
Item number 6, the Financial Review Committee meeting minutes of September 23rd, 2015. Is that right, Mr. Bazarek?
That's correct, Madam. That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay, that item will be removed. Any other items? Okay, staff, any item?
Public.
Yes. Staff has any item to
Staff
remove?
does not have any items to remove, but the public does.
Okay, so a member of the public has an item to be removed?
2 items, number 4 and number 9.
Okay, number 4 being Planning Commission meeting minutes, November 14, 2016, that will be removed. And number 9, claims and demands, is that correct? Okay, so those 3 items will be removed. Any other items? Okay, with those items removed, we now move to the consent calendar. And I ask if there is a motion.
I'll move the balance, Madam Mayor.
I'll second it.
Motion has been moved to approve the balance and seconded. Let's vote. Vote is 5-0. The items left, the balance of the consent calendar is approved. So we will now go through each item separately. Let's start with item 4, Planning Commission meeting minutes, November 14. And that was pulled by a member of the public, correct? Does that member wish to speak to that? Okay, Ms. Irene Fisher? And just so everyone is familiar, we give you 3 minutes to make your public comment. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Lewis and Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt and Councilman Tomlinson, Vic and Joseph Muller. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. The reason I wanted to address the Planning Commission minutes were because I did attend that meeting and was very interested in the South Cove Lanier Park presentation that was presented by Community Development Director Ursula. And I've been very interested in this park and what's been happening with it. And I feel that it would be neat and very appropriate to have on the city website under public interest, points of interest, or under Arts and Culture Commission website link, to have a listing of all the art and public places in Dana Point with a picture and maybe a description so that the residents know where they all are, because I don't think we all do know. And that would also be something that the You know, the Dana Point Tourism Business Improvement District, with their budget, could possibly have a brochure at the hotels where people could do a walking tour of these art and public places, because I think it identifies the city. It gives us a cultural image to not only the people who live here, but it shows our value structure and what we believe Dana Point is, and we showcase to the public. I didn't write out what I wanted to read tonight. I'm doing it off the cuff, but I really believe strongly that there should be something on the website so that we can see where these pieces are. And with the new construction projects that are coming into Dana Point, there'll be that 1.5% money that we need to know where that goes, how much it is, so that when $920,000 is spent for Surf Icon statues, that the public knows that before. And there should be an opportunity for the public at some point to participate or listen to the discussions for what goes on with art in public places. When you get $2.3 million for a park, you need to be very astute with how you spend the money, and that it represents the wishes of the community in addition to nonprofits and city staff and so on. Anyways, I'd like to congratulate both of you on joining the council. I'm really happy about your selection, and I look forward to a wonderful year with you all working cooperatively together and doing what's best for Dana Point. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before you leave, if you could just tell us your name and place of residence for the record.
Okay, it's Irene Fasher. We've been living in lovely Dana Point since 1972, raised our family here. I love it. We'll never leave.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your comments.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other public comments on this item?
No, that's the only one for number 4.
Okay. So are any council comments before we call for a motion? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Fasher made some really good points about where our art and public places exist in the city. I'm not sure who would handle that, but I think that's a good idea. I think we do need to do something like that in the brochure for our guests coming in, to let them know where it is. And I don't know if we can go as far as a walking tour, because I don't know where they are right now, but I think it'd be a good idea to let people know where it is.
It's not on the agenda, but I have our deputy city manager over there looking at me like he wants to say something, so I'm going to let him do that.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the staff has been working with the Arts and Culture Commission to do just that, and collecting the inventory with photographs. We anticipate that will be up on our website in February.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. And I would just ask, because I've sat at home and listened, and it's hard to hear on the video if who's ever speaking doesn't speak right into the microphone. Okay, with that, do we have a motion to approve the item number 4?
I move that we approve item number 4.
And a second?
I'll second that motion, Madam Mayor.
Vote, please. Okay, by 5-0, the item number 4, Planning Commission meeting minutes, November 14, 2016, has been approved. Let's move on to item 6, Financial Review Committee meeting minutes, September 23, 2016. I assume that's 2016.
It is 15.
It is 15. Okay. Did you have a comment on that, Mr. Vizorek?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason I pulled this item is that the recommended action for us tonight is to receive and file these minutes. I actually don't think we can receive and file these minutes because they have not been properly approved. And when you receive and file something, what you're doing is making it part of the public record. This is an official government document. So under the circumstances, I don't think we can do that. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering why these are not properly approved. So I'm going to have to give some background. I'm holding the agenda from the Financial Review Committee of Tuesday, December 13th. On it is the approval of the minutes from September 23rd, 2015. That's what we're talking about. And so in theory, that's where they were approved. Now, looking at the roll call of the committee members for that meeting of the Financial Review Committee, it says Carlos N. Olvera, Chair, John Tomlinson, Vice Chair, Larry Rolap, Public Member, Andrew DePremio, Public Member, and Mike Killebrew, Committee Member. So it seems like so far so good, right? There's one problem with this is that Carlos Olvera was not on the Financial Review Committee. I'm really quite at a loss as to why he was there, and even further, why he would have chaired this meeting, not being a part of the Financial Review Committee. So what that tells me is basically this meeting of the Financial Review Committee is a nullity. Everything that they did is null and void when you had a non-member of that committee participating, not only participating, but chairing the meeting. So under those circumstances, I don't think anything that happened at that Financial Review Committee meeting of December 13, 2016 is valid. So under those circumstances, I don't think these minutes have been properly approved. Just a few more words. Some people might think, well, what's the big deal? It's just going to be received and filed. But I want to say that to maybe make an analogy, there's something called the broken windows theory of policing, maybe some of you have heard of. It's basically you need to pay attention to details, and you need to pay attention to small things, because if you don't, then the big things are going to get away from you. And really the point is it's a slippery slope. If we allow something like this to go through, then where does it end? So having said that, I'm actually going to make a motion that we not receive and file these minutes. That's my motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Before we get a second on the motion, I would just like to ask staff or Mr. Munoz if there's any comment on what Mr. Vazorek just had to say.
Yes, I do have a comment. I was responsible for sending the invites out for that, and honestly, when I was looking at the first item on the agenda, which was the minutes from 2015, I simply picked the chair and vice chair, which happened to be Carlos and John, and the invites went out to them, and were also listed on that agenda. So that was an honest or simple mistake. There was no intent to not invite Councilmember Vic Sorek. There's another complicating factor that I'll honestly say did not play into how I came up with the names to invite, but the week prior there had been a reorganization. This committee is typically mayor pro tem, so even looking back at it at this point in time, the mayor and mayor pro tem on December 13th would have actually been Councilmember Schoeffel and mayor pro tem. Actually, I'm sorry, Mayor Schoeffel and Mayor Pro Tem Tomlinson. So I don't think, regardless of what I did, I was going to get this right unless I had picked up on it and started asking a bunch of questions. So there was the intent just to have the meeting. The important part of the meeting, obviously, was the annual investment policy that there are no major changes on. That's on this agenda later. But that being said, I'm owning this. I made the mistake and directed staff to send out the invites to who they went out to. And the meeting was properly noticed. And I don't know if it matters that there was still a majority of the committee there that participated, but we did have a council member, Carlos Olvera, that was there, chaired the meeting, participated, that was not on the committee. So I don't know where to go beyond that.
Okay, so there was a quorum of the duly convened meeting, is that correct?
There was a quorum there, but I'm going to defer to, we're into a legal realm here that I'm not comfortable in making opinions on.
Mr. Munoz?
Well, I'm learning the facts as I'm sitting here. If you want to get hyper-technical, if there was a quorum, I suppose you could excuse it as an inadvertent error on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm wondering if there's a requirement to notice all the members of the committee under the Brown Act, and it sounds to me as though we may have inadvertently failed to have done that. The easy and probably proper solution to this strikes me to put whatever the issues of business were at that meeting on the next meeting of the Financial Review Committee, and have, let there be no question that it was done properly and we can ratify or redo whatever occurred at the prior meeting, and that way there's just no question about it.
Would that satisfy your comments, Mr. Vazorek? If we just have the items that were heard at the September 23rd, 2015, just reheard at the next committee?
No matter, my motion is a simple one. It's simply that we don't receive and file these minutes. Now, what we do to correct it, we can figure that out moving forward. I mean, that's not going to change what my motion is, but basically the way I understood it is we need a redo. We need to have a meeting of the Financial Review Committee and go through the agenda with a properly constituted Financial Review Committee. The members who should be there to vote on these things. Without that, everything that happened at that meeting is null and void.
Yeah,
So my motion remains the same.
And Madam Mayor, if I could elaborate, I think that Mr. Vixorik's motion is the appropriate motion under the facts, and then staff can be directed to take such corrective action as is deemed appropriate once we can make sure we're doing it right. I'm flying off the cuff a little bit here, but I think that's the right remedy, but I'm not positive.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is not to file and receive the Planning Commission meeting minutes of September 23, 2015. Can we vote, please? Not to receive, okay. Okay, so by 5-0, we have yes votes to not receive and file the Planning Commission meeting minutes of September 23rd, 2015, so they will not be received and they will not be filed.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to
Yes.
point something out real quickly. Item 14 on new business is also going to be affected by this because that's the annual review of the investment policy, which was changed at that meeting and approved by that board. And so I think it'd be appropriate if we pulled that item at this point as well.
Okay, is that Mr. Munoz, is that your advice?
That makes logical sense to me. And it just would indicate that it would be prudent to have a meeting of the Financial Review Committee sometime in the near future to just, look again at the work that was done at the prior meeting, cross the Ts and dot the Is on it.
Okay, so we'll pull item number 14, and that will then appear on the agenda for City Council after that takes place. All right, now we're on item 9, claims and demands. Do we have a member of the public that wish to speak on this item? Welcome, Mr. Buck Hill.
Hi, Buck Hill, now a 19-year resident of Dana Point. And many times before other councils, I've advocated some improvements in the financial reporting, and particularly focus of the financial reporting. There's a sheet that's just been passed out to you, which are the notes I'm going to read from. But I think we could do better than we are, and I think particularly the council should be given better tools to make financial decisions. They come along all the time. You need to know, how does the city stand versus its budget or plan, and is it ahead or behind? And the reason I'm concerned, I looked ahead to item 11, which is this financial report, which was just rendered to you. And on page 31 of it, it says, through November, we've experienced a deficit of $3,996,000, essentially $4 million. And I don't know whether that was planned or not planned, but given the knowledge I can gain from the financial reporting, it seems like a mystery. And I think financial reporting should endeavor to tell you whether it's good or bad, or is there a problem or isn't there. I focused on the claims and demand section, which is this section 9, and I looked at some interesting things to me. Rutan and Tucker, for the period covered, which was a few days over the month of December, was paid $349,742 just for that 1 month period. That is to the best of my knowledge, nearly 50% of the budget for FY17 for the year for legal, or excuse me, the city attorney department. Now, I'm going back to the original budget because I haven't found a republished one on the amended one. But the original budget for the city attorney was $707,000, $707,500. So they spent half of that in the month of December with a few days of January. Likewise, I got curious about this and went back through other claims and demands. What the claims and demands are is essentially a list of the checkbook, what checks were written and how much were they. So to the best of my ability, I thumbed through all of them for this fiscal year, July, August, and so on, up through this one for November. I totaled that legal costs through that period were $941,844. That's way over the annual budget in a 6-month period. And I asked the question, was Doug Chikevitz's severance included? I don't know whether it's been paid or accrued, or it seems like that's the kind of item that would create a variance. I think in order for the council and the public to feel comfortable that the finances are going well, they need to be informed on how do we stand to date? Are we on plan? Is the revenue above plan, or will it be by the end of the year? Are the expenses under plan, or will they be by the end of the year? Are we in good shape, or are we in bad shape? Thank you.
Thank you. I just would like to, if I heard you right, the $349,000, I think $542 number.
Yes.
You said was for 1 month. I believe that was for September, October, and November.
No, it was paid in December.
Okay, but it was for
the typical policy had been to pay about 2 months afterwards. So, for example,
if I could step in here, it was for those 3 months.
Okay. So I was just for the record,
well,
the services,
in addition,
yes, I understand your point. They were paid at that 1 month, but they were for...
I went through for the 6 month, and they were paid about $790,000.
In addition, you're going to see checks written this year that were accruals from the end of last fiscal year.
Okay.
So I would be more than happy to provide a listing of current year expenditures or past year expenditures by month for our legal services. That's not an issue. And it actually is also reflected in the monthly financial reports that we provided as agenda item number 11 under the city attorney line item. And also litigation will be a separate line item in there. Mm-hmm. And obviously or I shouldn't say obviously, but in my quarterly reports, I would also be talking about any variances, if you will, any material variances anywhere on our budget, including the city attorney, if that were to come up.
Yes, I just wanted it clarified for the record, though, that I understood your point. It was being paid in 1 month, but it was for 3 months of service. So I just wanted that clarified.
And one other clarification, since you posed the question about Doug Chikevitz's severance, that would be included in our payroll numbers. So under his questions and looking at the check register, they would be in our ADP, which are our payroll service numbers. But they will also show up in our monthly financial statements when they post. So there was a payment that posted in January as part of it. And his normal payroll that posted back, I believe, on October 31st, right around there.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other members of the public that want to comment on this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
Any members of the council? Do I have a motion on the claims and demands item?
I move we accept the file of claims and demands.
Second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, let's now vote. By a vote of 5-0, the claims and demands will be accepted and filed. Okay, that moves us out of the consent calendar, and now Madam Clerk, are there any public comments? Okay.
When I go back to my chair, you can ask me different one. You just need to
Oh,
ask
okay.
me that. But, and then you can read this part before you give these.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before I go to the public comments, at this time, do you have any titles of ordinances listed to read?
No, Madam Mayor, I have no titles to read this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to proceed to the public comments. I will just take them in order that I was given. The first is Stephen Wachowski, and I do apologize if I butcher anybody's name. Thank you. Wachowski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Stephen Wontrowski from Mission Viejo. And I've made various appearances last year to the city council advising not only the council but the residents of the extent of overcharges that you're experiencing with the OCFA. And what I've done is I've submitted 2 letters as part of my public comment. And the first one is a short one. It's January 13th letter to the Board of Supervisors, Orange County Board of Supervisors. And what the background is that for years, the OCFA has advised you, council, and residents that you have no liability for the pension costs of the firefighters at OSERS, all right, for years. For 4 years, I have requested that the OCFA provide a legal opinion based in pension law to substantiate that assertion, because the cities believed that was the case. Nothing happened until I reported January of last year that OSERS, who has the unfunded liability obligation to pay, their attorney, highly respected in the state of California, basically throughout the nation, he said that the member cities are ultimately liable for that pension liability. Based on that, I still requested an opinion, okay? In October, we finally got to that point with the OCFA. And what they said is that they're going to spend $50,000 to $65,000 to get an expert legal opinion based in bankruptcy and pension law to come up with, are the cities responsible for that liability or not? Here's the petition to the Board of Supervisors. The OCFA said, we're not going to release that opinion to the public. And also, the city council members here who are not a director on that board of the OCFA, they cannot be told about that opinion, all right? Because it's a privileged opinion. And so the public now, and this city, and you're not the only city, believe me, you're not the only city that's involved in this mess. They're not going to be apprised of just what the extent of the liability is. And you're liable. And you know what? You are liable. So that's the first letter. The second letter is, I just want to thank the residents here for the support they have given me in my determination to get back all the overcharges that not only you've experienced, but 3 other cities too. And I pledged I was going to work my hardest to do that. And I appreciate the support the cities have given me. And the residents here, I like the residents here. And also, if they want more background information, they can go to my other letter that was sent here. I don't have any time to go through that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have those letters? Have they been received? Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Cindy Fleming. And next will be Carol Kelly. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Cindy Fleming, and I'm a 32-year resident of Dana Point. I think I have some neighbors in the audience here. If they would stand up, that'd be great. The Santa Clara neighborhood consists of the residential area south of the alley between Del Prado and Santa Clara Avenue and between Old Golden Lantern and Blue Lantern, including El Camino Capistrano. Within this area are some of the oldest homes in Dana Point, including what I've been told are Sidney Woodruff's personal home and that of his architect or foreman. Thank you. It's a nice neighborhood where the residents exhibit pride of place in caring for their homes, apartments, and condos, and the neighborhood in general, and where all residents of Dana Point and visitors alike come to walk along the bluff and enjoy the overlooks and the parks at either end. In implementing improvements for the Lantern Business District Town Center, the city installed additional signal lights on PCH and stop signs down Del Prado. The streets were realigned and parking was lost in several areas, even though it was gained in a few others. These improvements had perhaps unintended consequences. Even though the fastest way through town is still to stay on PCH, there are those who, when they hit a red light on PCH, now jog over to race down Santa Clara rather than wait for the light or stop repeatedly on Del Prado. Residents of the Santa Clara neighborhood have seen this increase in traffic and speed, along with frequent horns and near misses that occur along when this traffic meets or when pedestrians and bicyclists are crossing the street. The town center improvements also exacerbated the problem of overflow business parking into the residential neighborhood. As a first step to mitigate these issues and without eliminating parking that is needed by the residents themselves, we are asking for the improvements before you. First, to provide planters on the residential side of the alley on each of the Lantern streets for a short distance as they come into the neighborhood. These planters do not need to change existing drainage patterns and are a proven method to calm speeds and provide a demarcation between business and residential areas, with visual cues that tell visitors that the business area has ended. Within each planter, we request a sign facing incoming traffic which reads, "Entering historic residential neighborhood, no business parking." Again, this is a first step to encourage a good neighbor policy rather than eliminating parking for everyone. We're also asking for 3- and 4-way stop signs at all intersections on Santa Clara to stop the cut-through traffic and mitigate speeding through the neighborhood. We understand that stop signs require a process and would like to thank Matt Sinacori and his crews for already putting out devices to measure traffic flow and speed. But regardless of their findings, we residents know that the stop signs are urgently needed before someone is seriously hurt.
Thank you. I do have your report and your drawing, and we'll be discussing that with the staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly, and after Ms. Kelly, Penny Maynard. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy New Year, and congratulations again to Deborah and Paul. My name is Carol Kelly. I'm a homeowner on Santa Clara Avenue in Dana Point, and I've lived in Dana Point for 25 years. First, I am here tonight to support the city putting in additional stop signs on Santa Clara Avenue for safety reasons. There are more cars traveling on Santa Clara to avoid the signals and traffic on PCH and Del Prado as a result of our new town center layout. This high-speed traffic will only increase as new businesses and planned residential housing, which is already in progress, are completed, thus increasing the population and the resultant traffic increase on Santa Clara Avenue. These stop signs will also help prevent cars and bike clubs from racing down Santa Clara during our annual bike race, summer concerts, and whale parades. During these events, many families and other pedestrian groups use Santa Clara Avenue to navigate to and from these events. Second, I support putting in a sign, see diagram on your handout, that would designate Santa Clara Avenue as a historic district, stating that there is no business parking in this district. We have had problems in the past with car repair shops and restaurants using our street for employee and customer parking as well as work inventory parking spaces. Third, I would support the idea of the city building a central parking structure. That's one of my big advocate points. Parking is definitely a problem in Dana Point. I was talking to a real estate agent the other day who said one of her clients wanted to use an existing property to open a new restaurant. However, the property did not have adequate parking to accommodate projected customers and employees, and since they could not meet these requirements, they abandoned the project. Potential visitors will not choose to drive 15 or 20 minutes to Dana Point, only to drive around the streets and alleys looking for a parking space. This problem could be solved if the city would build a central parking structure in one of the empty lots in the middle of town as a public-private shared-use project with a prospective developer. This concept should be aggressively pursued by staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the stop signs you're referring to are on Ms. Fleming's handout, yes? Thank you. Ms. Maynard? And after that, Mr. Ross Teasley? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Penny Maynard, a 21-year resident of Dana Point, and I have some ideas to better connect residents to their elected officials and to grow the economy. I'll list them and provide more detail to anyone who asks. My contact info is available on the city's website from campaign reporting forms. To connect residents, I believe in city council districts, 2 at large and 3 council. This would bring district meetings with residents where council would bring staff on a particular concern to that district. Council members would get to know residents and go to the district for votes. It improves connections with elected officials. And bring back city council biweekly office hours at City Hall for mayor and any council member who wishes to have them. I believe Diane Harkey did this very successfully, as did other elected officials in the past. And I have an idea for improved communications between city and residents from a Bay Area chamber where I was the executive in a community the size of Dana Point. This idea would be an e-newsletter update from the CM, the city manager, or the deputy city manager of projects including construction and meetings, and this e-news would be on the website. This could be weekly or every 2 weeks. I also have another idea from RSM that would be good in DP, but I'm still researching. I'm working on a website that will provide DP issues of concern and a forum where I'll solicit comments, opinions from residents so their voices can be heard. When it's time for forward thinking, Dana Point Beach is a good idea and would increase TOT. We have Capistrano Beach, Marnock Beach, and there will come a time for Dana Point Beach. When hiring a new city manager, be mindful that it should be someone whose heart and soul cares about Dana Point and realizes it's a 24/7 job. A high standard was set, and we need to be mindful of that. And go Pats Sunday. And yes, and what is it about Ben? Oh, no, I forgot. Big Ben. Bye-bye, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say that I do agree with you about either council hours or some way for people to come and talk to us. And I have been talking to other council members about that very thing. Thank you. Mr. Teasley. And then Tony Nelson. Good evening, I guess.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council and staff. My name is Ross Teasley, and I'm a proud Dana Pointer. I wanted to take a minute tonight to invite all of you and everyone in Dana Point to look at an initiative that I've just begun online called OpenDanaPoint.org. And the intention of this citizen-driven, nonpartisan mission is to, number one, seek to establish an open data policy for Dana Point. I'll talk about that again in a second. Number two, make it easier for residents to understand and participate in city government to whatever degree we can through a coalition that's citizen-driven and that's citizen-driven. Number three, improve the accountability and build trust between residents and staff and City Hall as a whole, meaning elected and staff. I think with an initiative to increase government transparency, an easy phrase to say, a hard thing to do. But the purpose of this initiative is to dig into the individual tactics of what do we as a community mean by government, open government and transparency, government transparency, beginning with data transparency. Increase the information sharing and the ability for regular citizens to understand the data from city staff, kind of along the lines of what Mr. Hill mentioned earlier with financial information. That's an example. The objective of this initiative would be for all of us to improve our ability to understand and participate in civic life in Dana Point. My goal is to begin that effort with specifically setting some policies for government data. The databases and information that's produced by the city, elected and staffs, and increase the ability for regular citizens to use that information and take part in government. So I just wanted to take a minute and introduce that concept. You'll find it online at opendanapoint.org, also on Facebook /OpenDanaPoint. And to that end, this is, I only have one copy of this for now. But what you'll find on that site is a link to an open document that is a draft version of an open data policy. And anyone with a Gmail account can make comments to this draft version. So the initiative of opendanapoint.org is meant to have the participation of staff, citizens, electeds, everyone, and the objective is to have an online open discussion of proposed policies. So I took the initiative to put together, after researching open data policies from several different cities around the country, and put that up as a draft and invite comments and participation in that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. It sounds very interesting, and I will be visiting that .org. Ms. Nelson, and then Michael Clemente.
Good evening, and welcome to our new mayor and our new mayor pro tem and our returning councilman. My name is Tony Nelson, resident of Capistrano Beach and co-founder of Capo Cares. Last week, we held a community meeting to explore the possibility of restoring Lower Pines Park in Capo Beach. This area was abandoned by the county, literally. They threw a structure down the hill almost 50 years ago, and today it is an unsightly dust bowl that is slowly eroding down the cliff. It is also some of Dana Point's most valuable oceanfront property, from which today squirrels and other rodents enjoy panoramic whitewater views. Our initial thought was that this inaccessible parkland could be used possibly for a dog zone, which would have been appreciated by the many dog owners who patronize the park on a daily basis. We approached the Architectural Guild of South Orange County, who generously prepared a beautiful pro bono conceptual design with two options for ADA access. One of them is a series of ramps down the slope, or our community favorite was clearly a beautiful bridge over the adjacent gully, which would link all three areas of the park and create a wonderful walking trail throughout the whole area. And that, of course, would open up further coastal vistas. In sharing the design concept with the community, we learned that most residents loved the idea of restoring the park, but many felt that its unique historical heritage and breathtaking views were simply too amazing for dogs to use. Sorry. After hearing their thoughts, we had to agree that if we can restore the park as suggested, it should be reserved for general public use. We can bring our dogs, but they'll be on leashes. Obviously, it will be necessary to conduct geological and financial feasibility studies before such a concept can become a reality, but we would love to see council consider reclaiming this beautiful and valuable land, which has a rich history, for public use. Secondly, in consideration of the large dog-loving constituency in our community, we would ask that further consideration be given to locating a dog zone or a dog run at another location within Capo Beach Parkland. My dog made me say that part. At this point, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to Cindy Fleming, Jim Pekarsky, and Bob Lacoste of the Architectural Guild of South Orange County. We request that council place their presentation on a future agenda and that the feasibility of the plan be studied as part of the upcoming comprehensive review planned by our Deputy City Manager, Mark Denny. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. I understand you've already had some conversations with Mr. Denny on this. Thank you. Mr. Clemente, and then Annie Steinberg. Mr. Clemente? Okay. Annie Steinberg, Miss Annie Steinberg, and then Barbara Bates. Nope. Going once. Okay. Is that all the public comments that we have?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll now close the public comment portion. And we will move on to the agenda items. Number 12, as I've already said, has been taken off calendar. So let us move to item number 13. The Doheny Village Plan Update. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there is a staff report. The recommended action is to receive and file it, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Director of Community Development, Ursula Luna Reynosa, for a quick report.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. As directed by the City Council, this is the monthly update on the Doheny Village Plan. It was an important effort, and the community indicated their desire to see this planning process move forward as expeditiously as possible, and staff committed to giving monthly updates to this body to show our progress. So in the last couple of months, because we canceled the second meeting of December, there's been quite a bit of activity. In mid-2016, the City Council directed staff to conduct some additional community meetings to allow some additional input, and particularly relative to parking. So that first meeting was held on September 14th of 2016. The meeting attendees indicated their support for the vision, but wanted to ensure the long-term success of the area with, the provision of additional public parking. Additionally, concerns were raised regarding potential traffic impacts on Doheny Park Road with suggested road diet roundabouts and other traffic calming measures. So the second meeting was held on November 14th of 2016. Staff provided an overview of the existing public parking available both on-street and off-street within the plan area, as well as potential sites that might be leased or acquired to provide overflow parking if needed. No funding for the public parking options were discussed at that time. Multiple properties were identified, and staff has commenced discussions with the property owners on those sites. At the November 14th meeting, additional concerns were raised regarding non-conforming uses. So if the plan moves forward and some of the uses allowed under the existing code were no longer to be allowed under the new form-based code, there were, of course, persons who were concerned about that. The technical term for that is legal non-conforming. So when a code changes, as long as that use remains in effect, it becomes a legal non-conforming use. A non-technical term that you may be familiar with is it becomes grandfathered. It's a grandfathered use. So we've assured the community and those particular users that their use would be grandfathered or allowed as long as they continue the use, and that this is an organic process that would occur over time. By changing the zoning, it does not mean that a business has to change their use to comply with the new zoning. They would do it at time when they decide to cease that use, and that's how that use would eventually no longer be allowed. And it's for generally a period of 6 months. That would be a standard that would be proposed for your consideration at the time that you adopt this code. Residents have also expressed interest in how the cost of all proposed new public improvements will be funded. To determine costs, assistance via contract is required to perform some necessary survey work, as well as some construction cost estimates. Assuming there is direction to assess some of the costs of the public improvements on the private developments, and using the estimated cost of the public improvements, a development nexus study would be prepared to determine the proportionate level of benefit to the private properties and their proportionate contribution toward the cost of the public improvements. In other words, it's a nexus study which would enable the city to exact benefit from the private development to fund some of those public improvements. Additionally, with council direction, a public infrastructure finance plan can be prepared to outline various funding options for the public improvements. At the November 14th meeting, the community or the folks who participated were asked if there was a general consensus to move forward, because at that time, all efforts on this process had been stalled in that staff didn't want to continue to spend money on the environmental impact review process if there wasn't support for the plan. And there was a sense that there was support to move forward. So staff has re-engaged the consultants to continue to move forward with the process. Doheny Park Road Diets, I want to talk about that a little bit. There was some concerns that were expressed at some of these meetings and also support. The FBC does not include a street section diagram for the road diet concept on the Doheny Park Road, but rather refers to the road diet as a preferred option to the 4-lane road schematic that is included in the form-based code. The form-based code is designed to create a pedestrian-friendly environment with a road that is very easy to cross to sort of bridge the two sides of Doheny Village together into one. To better achieve that goal, it has been proposed that Doheny Park Road be narrowed from 2 lanes of traffic to 1 traffic lane in each direction, along with the installation of roundabouts at key intersections to provide for easier pedestrian crossings, create wide sidewalk areas with attractive landscaping to encourage outdoor dining and increased pedestrian activity, and install a new streetscape to denote you have arrived at a special place as opposed to the way the street is currently used as a pass-through. In order to allow for these objectives, the city will need to conduct more detailed road diet traffic studies to ensure the road diet can appropriately accommodate traffic and obtain approval from adjacent cities, OCTA, and Caltrans. This process could take as long as 2 years complete. So as has been previously reported to this body, there was a decision to, instead of delay the form-based code, which would allow for some of the land use changes to change, which help achieve some of the vision, it was determined that the road diet analysis would be undertaken under a separate but parallel process. Preliminary discussions have taken place with all the affected agencies noted above, and the good news was that Caltrans didn't say, no way. Instead, they asked for additional analysis, which is, in the Caltrans world, a positive thing. So there would be a need for a separate contact for the preparation of the required traffic analysis for the road diet, and it will be brought forward to the City Council at some future date for consideration. The staff report also details some active code enforcement. I'm not going to go into the details of those actions. It's in your staff report, but feel free to ask me any questions if you have any. And with that, I'm available to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you for your report. Let me just kind of go through my process. I think it's a little different than other mayors, so just so no one's confused. I will read an agenda item, then ask for staff report, ask for comment or questions from City Council regarding the staff report. Then I will ask for any public comments on that item, and then I will read the recommended action and ask for a motion and a second. Once we get a motion and a second, then we can debate the motion and the second among the City Council. So we've heard the report. Are there any questions from City Council for that on that report?
I have some.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Thank you, Ursula, for the report. Basically, first of all, want to thank the staff for all the effort to work this project and keep it moving. It's a big project. It tends to stall out for all sorts of reasons. So thank you to all of you for the fact that you keep moving it along and trying to keep it from stalling out, even though there's lots of issues and lots of questions to be dealt with as it moves along. So let me just generally get my feedback to you and questions. So I was able to attend both the September 14th and the November 14th meeting. And I thought they were very well ran and conveyed a lot of information and got a lot of positive feedback from the community. So that is a good starting point. It's a lot to understand. So there's probably a lot more meetings to be worked through to really get the understanding. I also concur with the staff's effort to keep it moving by separating out tasks that can be done in parallel while other things move forward. I think that removing the road diet from the program EIR so that the EIR can continue to move, and eliminating the parking plans from the EIR so that it can move will allow us to do more in parallel and keep the project moving. Having said that, I have concerns about those that I think we need to address as we're moving things forward. As noted in the report, parking remains a concern and needs further work. I understand that predicting parking locations and requirements are difficult, and my dive into form-based codes made me realize that the adaptability of the buildings to many different uses means that parking must support this adaptability. I also have done enough digging to know that distance and convenience affect parking usage. With these in mind, I'd encourage the staff to take each of the parking areas being pursued and determine the sections of Doheny Village that these could be served from each of these parking areas based on distance and impediments like wide or busy streets that would have to be crossed to get from parking to the businesses. Also, since residential parking generally needs to be closer than public parking, I'd like to see that map split when we look at what could be served to see if any of the parking areas being pursued could offset any of the residential parking needs. The thinking being that the form-based code allows reuse of buildings easily or to be adapted to multiple use over their life, and the parking requirements change as the use is adapted. So we need to understand the various ways parking in the public sector could be made available either to residential or public use, depending on how the buildings are adapted. So I think it's worth looking at and starting to map out the potential parking areas and what they could serve. Okay. Also, the road diet requires a city traffic study, which needs to be scheduled and funded, and as noted, could take a couple of years. We haven't estimated the cost yet, so we haven't asked for or approved money for that. But also, OCTA and Caltrans have to weigh in and decide whether they would approve that change or not. And before we spend money, I would like to know whether we have to do the studies in order to approach OCTA and Caltrans for approval, or whether we can determine whether we can approach them for approval prior to spending money, at least qualified approval. I'd like not to spend the money if it is determined that they will not approve it, no matter that the traffic study isn't essential for their approval. So if we can figure out with them, and basically if we can approach them again, or actually maybe just get staff together and determine the reasons why they would say no, what their objections being to changing it are, and if there's anything as we look at it that we could do to remove those objections early in the process instead of finding out late after we've spent a fair amount of money that they have objections that we didn't address. So whatever we can do to determine why they might say no, let's surface it now and see what we could do to basically eliminate those objections before we go further on the road diet, if we could do that. Additionally, I do also want to thank the staff on an effort that's been made to do code enforcement you brought out. Again, as we look to revitalize the area, making it just a more pleasant place to be for the residents and the businesses is really important. So I urge that we continue to look at how we do code enforcement. And I think we have another bit of money that will come up later that may be allocated to do some landscaping in the area to, again, make it look a little better. So all of the things that we can do short term to make this area more pleasant, to make it more interesting for business, and to just to begin to improve it, I encourage us to continue to look at innovative ways, and thank you for all the effort done. The last part, comes back to that. In the September 14th meeting, the Opticos people said we need to view this overall Doheny Village plan as a long-term, that it could take 25 years to actually fully materialize, and we should view it as 6 to 10 years to really come into something that begin to look like the plan and much longer. I appreciate that we don't want to redo this plan for the next 25 years. So if we don't do it with that in mind, we will have been short-sighted. On the other hand, I think there's a fair amount of opportunity to do things in the next 2 or 3 years that begin to show up in the area and begin to make it a better place to be and visit. So I would like, again, as we're working through this, to identify areas that have a much shorter term impact but are consistent with our plan. So essentially, those are my pleas to the staff, if you will, to help keep this moving and get it and pull this plan together that's consistent with expectations of our residents. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody, any other council member have questions for staff on the report that we heard? No. Does any member of the public? Thank you. Okay, first, Jim Pickering, then Tony Nelson, and then Robert Pickering. Does that say Jim? Tim, sorry.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Tim Pickering, owner and partner in the Pickering Properties LLC, located at the end of Victoria Boulevard, 25802 Victoria Boulevard. When I reviewed the Doheny Village form-based code, it doesn't read like the English that I normally associate with it. To me, it looked more had to do with building code restrictions or designs. And one of the initial concerns is we have boats coming into the facility 50 feet long with, say, and they have a boat hauler, which is, we measured recently, 26 feet long. So we need to be able to have those 76 feet of boat and trailer make a 270-degree radius turn on a roundabout onto Victoria Boulevard, and reducing the road width from 4 lanes to 2 lanes may cause a problem with that. On the plans, it appears that our south parcel is joined with Doheny Building Supply, and there's trees shown where the boat mechanics presently do the work, and I'm not sure how to explain the absence of the building where they now work that are no longer shown in the plan. So I don't know if we're looking for the demise of our operation or if it's just somebody's wishful thinking, but it concerns me a little bit that we don't have a facility that's in use the way it was previously. It was already addressed how the building is shown will be built and be infrastructure paid for. And it appears as though building permits going forward may have a design restriction on them to conform to this existing plan. And that's of concern. We have an existing design on our facility, which goes back to Sierra Lumber, I believe, back in the 60s or something like that. And, having to change the look and feel of a facility designed for boats, and now it's designed for pedestrian retail area, it's kind of inconsistent with what we have going on presently. And so what I'm wondering is, these restrictions, not so much on our present operation, but on the future use, represent a reduction in use capability. And if somebody else wants to come in and put in, like, I don't know, say it's Whole Foods there, and they say, well, your new design doesn't conform to what we want to do, so we're not interested in your property. So I, as a business owner, have lost value in my property. Does that make sense? This has happened to us in another state recently, where we have a property and they're looking to change the use of it. And as I understand it, that this is a feature of eminent domain, just taking the use and the value of the property away from the landowner. So I guess I'd ask for your legal opinion on this matter, because I've had just a quick Google search suggests that taking away a value of the property is a feature of eminent domain.
Yes, I understand, and we will be, that has been discussed, and I thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Tony Nelson?
Good evening. My name is Tony Nelson, resident of Capistrano Beach. I'm pleased to see the Doheny Village Plan on the agenda tonight, and I'm delighted to see the efforts to improve the present state of the community laid out on page 5 of the staff reports. That was the part about code enforcement. All these things help, but I think everyone knows that real change will only be possible in this area once the plan is implemented. I'm asking Council to please understand the sense of utmost urgency within the community to complete the plan and submit it to the Coastal Commission. We also agree with Opticos that the road diet is the essential ingredient in a successful revitalization, as is access to the beach and to businesses along PCH, as well as connectivity with the rest of Dana Point. While we realize that this is a lengthy and complex process, we believe that with your direction, work can be expedited to get new protective zoning into this area as soon as feasible. While we've been waiting for these changes, a pawn shop, an auto zone, and now a large drug counseling center have put down roots in our community. I mean no respect to these legitimate businesses. However, they are not the uses contemplated in the Opticos plan, and they would not have been allowed under the new zoning code. Every day we delay is another day during which we can lose another piece of the vision for Doheny Village. We were happy to learn that Council has some ideas for interim improvements in the village, for which we'll be very grateful. We thank you for taking every opportunity to enhance the area before the final plan can be implemented, which we recognize may still be years out. We also hope that a funding plan can be put in place, and if the infrastructure is to be financed through city reserves, that funds can be set aside this year and every year until the capital budget is satisfied. Most of all, we trust that you all understand the huge potential in this beach-closed village and the tremendous boon a revitalized Doheny Village will be to all of Dana Point. This is an amazing area. It can be just a tremendous benefit to Dana Point. We urge you to remove any roadblocks, fund the EIRs and other necessary studies, bring property owners, like these gentlemen, Caltrans, the school and water districts, and any other constituencies to the table to iron out the problems. Seek practical, time-efficient solutions and move ahead with the plan to revitalize Doheny Village before it's too late. We just want to get moving. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I do share your belief about the value of Doheny Village. I just want you to know we're thinking about you, and we'll take care of you. And then Robert Pickering.
Good evening, Mayor, city council members and city staff. My name's Robert Pickering. I'm a resident of Laguna Niguel, but I've had business interests in Dana Point and the Doheny Village area for 18 years now. I just wanted to bring up what I believe is a inaccuracy in this document that we've been talking about. On page 3 at the top, it says the consensus was in support of proceeding with the FBC and securing the identified parking lots for public use. At the end of the meeting, when the question was asked if the city should continue to pursue the Doheny Village plan, I only saw 3 or 4 hands raised in saying that they wanted to move forward. So in my mind, that's not a consensus, and I just wanted to point that out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. That's all the public comments that I have on this agenda item.
Yes,
Thank you.
Madam
The public comment portion for this agenda item is now closed. What I'd like to do now is read the recommended action, see if there is a motion and a second, and then we can debate the motion. So the recommended action is that the City Council receive and file this report. Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I have a question for staff before we proceed. Is that
Yes, please.
appropriate? Thank you. The Pickering family has indicated that there was a problem with their building not being indicated on the plan. What, can you guys tell me what that was? Is that,
Well, the form-based code itself is a zoning document. It's zoning code. There is a schematic that was produced as part of the design charrette, and that document was part of some of the visioning that went on, and it was really to illustrate what some uses could be. The only, without having the specific document in front of me that Mr. Pickering was referencing, that's what I'm guessing he was referencing, and perhaps there was a visioning exercise done on a portion of the property that showed a different building. But that illustrative document is by no means the new code. The new code is the text in the form-based code, and I will reiterate what I said earlier, that any legal use, a use that has been legally approved, they have the appropriate permits, et cetera, and if they continue operating under those permits and do not cease operations, even if the new zoning code no longer allows that use, they will be legal non-conforming and will be allowed to continue their use.
thank you.
I also have a question. When you say the new form-based code, I assume we're talking about proposed, because those have not been accepted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, do I have any other questions? Yes, Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pickering also mentioned the traffic circles and having to do a 270-degree turn. If I recall at the first charrette, they looked at that, right? That they could take a full 110-foot semi and get it through those turns. Is that correct?
Correct. There was recognition of some of the boats' uses, as well as Ganal Lumber has big semi-trucks as well. So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to receive and file the report?
I'll make a motion to move and receive the report.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there any debate on this motion?
Yeah,
Mr. Miller?
I have a couple issues. I know parking doesn't have to be part of the EIR because it technically doesn't create an environmental impact. But I still have an issue with this. I mean, we just went through a very contentious time in our city over parking in Town Center. And they did the exact same thing. They kicked the parking down the road. It wasn't part of their EIR. It wasn't part of their plan. And we're setting ourselves up for this again. The form-based code that we're talking about down there, and I was part of those charrettes, and I went through an exercise to try to get a building on one of these lots with the code we're presenting. And that is not something that's going to be acceptable to this community if they follow what happened in Town Center. And I just think it's a bad idea for us to continue down this path without resolving the parking issue first, because it could totally change the form-based code in Doheny Village. And then we've spent all of this time and energy and resources on a document that's no longer valid. because it won't meet the parking requirements. And, I don't want to stop this. I just think instead of taking ourselves down this path, that we could get to the end and realize it's totally wrong because this is not what the parking is going to be. Why don't we resolve this parking issue first and then go down the road with the EIR, because it could change our form-based code. I mean, that's kind of my issue with this. I want this to keep moving. Doheny Village has been a priority for me since I ran in 2014, but I want to do it the right way. I don't want to just hammer it through because people want it to be done quickly. It needs to be done correctly so we don't have this problem again.
Madam Mayor, if I may respond, because I'm not sure it
Yes,
was
please.
exactly a question, but I did want to clarify a couple things, and thank you, Councilmember Miller, for allowing me to clarify a couple of points, because I see greatly how this could be confusing. So while the EIR itself is not analyzing parking, because parking doesn't result in environmental impact, as you stated, the form-based code itself does propose parking standards. It does propose standards that the consultant and currently staff believe are appropriate for the type of place that is envisioned in the form-based code. Now, of course, whether folks agree with that or not, I think some additional meetings are necessary based on input received this evening to see if we can get there. But that is one of the key differences between the town center plan that was adopted in 2008 and the form-based code. So the town center plan in 2008 did adopt parking standards. It adopted the zoning code parking standards that apply citywide. And then the way it punted the situation for the future is in the implementation section of the town center plan. It said that a number of things should be done. One, a supply-demand analysis. Two, appropriate parking standards for a mixed-use district should be created. And those were the things that were done later and was very contentious, as you mentioned. So the difference here in the Doheny Village plan, it is proposing what it believes to be appropriate parking standards as part of this. I think the question is whether there's community support for that. And so I would recommend that there be perhaps a joint study session between the Planning Commission and the City Council and other meetings for additional ability to talk further about those parking standards, because they will be brought before this body for consideration when you approve the form-based code. Even if they're not part of the EIR, it's a very important planning policy decision that will be brought before this body for consideration. So it's not being separated, it's just not being analyzed under the EIR, but it is something that needs to be considered.
So let me understand this. We are going to implement parking standards with our form-based code without doing the analysis and getting the input from the public. Because I attended every one of the charrettes, well, not every one, I missed the last one because I brought up the parking. And the one we had down at the church, there was not a consensus that this parking standard was good. There were a lot of people very upset about it and very concerned about it. And starting to talk about public parking structures. And once that conversation started, Opticos kind of changed their attitude on will parking structures work with the code that we're talking about. And I think those issues have to be resolved before we start presenting or proposing new zoning codes that the community's not going to agree with. I mean, I really think that we have to solve this parking thing before we take this any farther down the road. Because according to Opticos and Dan, if parking structures are what the community wants, this form-based code is not it's not going to look like it does today. It's going to change it. That was my understanding from the charrette.
So you are correct. At the September 14th meeting, parking was absolutely issued and characterized as you have just said. The work that was done by staff between the September 14th meeting and the November 14th meeting, which I believe you did not attend, was looking at existing on-street parking that is provided under the Doheny Village Plan that doesn't exist today. So there is a number of additional public on-street parking spaces that get created as part of the form-based code. And in addition, there were a number of potential parking lot opportunities that were found that could be, as the staff report says, purchased or leased for parking facilities, whether they're surface parking level lots initially and or identified for parking facilities in the future. That information was provided to those who attended the November 14th meeting, and as mentioned, there was the group at the end was addressed with, have these issues been resulted enough to keep moving forward? And while I think Mr. Pickering did correctly indicate that only a few people raised their hands, that's why I said, well, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. Does anyone disagree? And nobody really stepped up to disagree. That's how we concluded that there was generally consensus to move forward. But again, hearing comments from you and Mayor Pro Tem, I agree that we should do some additional study sessions, some additional meetings, and that we can, because the EIR is a disclosure document. What an EIR does, it just discloses, these are the environmental impacts of a project, here's how you can mitigate them or not, and that's all that's being analyzed. The form-based code itself is a much larger document than just looking at environmental impacts. It's looking at a number of policy decisions that don't necessarily have to be analyzed environmentally, but are still very important policy decisions for this body to make. So I think we can continue to work on that, continue the EIR so that we don't slow things down, but I agree, have the right dialogue that's necessary to get everyone comfortable to land the plane. And we have talked to our environmental consultants because we did just want to confirm that if a parking facility at some point in the future, if that was the solution that was found, would that alter our EIR at any point? And because it's a program level EIR, they indicated no, that a project level EIR could be done in the future to analyze any traffic impacts associated with that parking facility. Because while we don't have to analyze parking, if you have one facility that's drawing all the traffic, we would have to analyze that. But that can be done at a future date with a project level EIR. Hopefully that answers questions.
So we're gonna continue. So if the form-based code document changes because our uses are going to change because of our parking, that's going to change the environmental impact report, correct?
No, we made sure to talk to our environmental consultants. My understanding is that the concern is relative to commercial parking because the form-based code right now does require residential parking to be done on site. So the commercial parking is really limited to the ground floor of Doheny Park Road, where it's envisioned to be some sort of mixed use. So that, by eliminating the need for on-site commercial parking potentially there, because a parking facility will fulfill those needs, it does allow some potentially slight increase in retail development. In talking to our EIR consultants, it's not significant enough. And as long as, under an EIR, if you analyze the most significant impacts that could occur, so as long as we overestimate the amount of retail, we can always be under that and be fine on the EIR. It's just when you underestimate is when you have a problem. And then the other side of the road is the Maker District as well as some other commercial. We should be fine from an EIR perspective moving forward.
Okay, well, I would support the joint study session with the Planning Commission and the City Council. I think we do need to have more meetings on this and get a better buy-in from the public because, quite frankly, the charrettes that I attended, they were well attended, but there was still a small cross section of this community that were there, and I just want to be very conscientious about how we move forward down there, and that we don't end up in a situation like we had in Town Center because we didn't get the level of input we needed on all aspects and all features of that development. So that's just my concern. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I share your concern on the parking long-term, but I would like to go upstream of that. And, we keep tossing around this term form-based code. I don't really know And I have a feeling most people don't really understand what that means and how it's going to impact, Doheny Village planning long-term. What I'd really like us to do is have a significant outreach to our residents to explain in detail what is a form-based code and what does it mean, because I think that when people hear it and understand it, as I have been delving into it in the past week or so, it's a real eye-opener what this means. So I really want everybody to be on board with it before we determine whether or not we're going to approve or not approve it. Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I would like to, Ursula, to reconfirm that changing the parking in the form-based, each of the form-based code, each of the forms have parking. If we change that parking during the course of the EIR, will it impact the EIR at the program level EIR, from your understanding?
No.
Okay, so that was the point I was trying to make earlier, was to make sure I understood that. Because I share the concerns that the parking requirements in there are, I believe they're inadequate. But I'm willing to and anxious to sit down with a broader group of people who have spent more time on this and just go through and understand why. And I also worry that even though the residential parking is required to be on site, and it's, I would say, light maybe, but not terribly so. But these buildings were designed to be able to adapt from residential to, their uses were required to be able to adapt. And the parking somehow has to support the adaptability. So as you're moving something that was initially an office into residential or vice versa, the parking has to accommodate that. And I couldn't understand how we were accounting for that yet.
Yes. So the form-based code does put form as sort of the highest level of review of a project, kind of understanding that a building should last 100 years or so, and that the use over time may change multiple times over that 100 years. There's a misnomer, though, that a form-based code doesn't regulate use at all, and that's incorrect. So it's just that a conventional zoning code, which is what we have in the rest of town, is very good at saying what you can't do, but it's not necessarily very good at telling what you can do. So it doesn't necessarily help create a predictable environment. And it puts use as the highest kind of level of what you would look at. And so the form-based code does look at use, but it's secondary to form. With that said, there will be zones in the form-based code that allow residential and don't allow commercial. So in the T4 neighborhood, for example, commercial uses, those buildings over time, even in 50 years, will not be allowed to be converted into commercial buildings. The flip side is if you had a residential house on Doheny Park Road, there the use would allow for that house maybe eventually to convert over into a business. And you see that in many communities throughout California. I can, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Livermore, where it was residential and kind of surrounding their downtown, and over it crept to where that residential house became a doctor's office or something like that. I think La Jolla, there's an example I'm familiar with, but it will be in specific areas. But you are correct in the fact that we tie parking so specifically to use. It does prevent the turnover of uses. So, and at some of the study sessions on parking in particular, I think we can delve into that a little bit more. But, thank you.
Yes, may I suggest that we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but this is what I want to get into in our outreach forums is specific examples of how this code will work, how it's implemented, what its limitations will be, and how it will impact, Dana Point long-term. Are there any other questions, comments, debate before we vote on this motion? And the motion is simply to receive and file the report. Okay, let's vote. Okay, so there's a 5-0 vote to receive and file the report regarding the Doheny Village Plan update. Thank you. Before I move on, I did want to ask about unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business that we haven't done?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, item 14 was pulled. Item 15, award of a contract for the construction of the annual residential roadway resurfacing project for fiscal year 16-17. Staff report?
I'm going to ask Mark Denny, our Deputy City Manager, to give that report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. The annual roadway resurfacing project was advertised for competitive bid on November 18th of 2016. And on December 15th of 2016, the city received 6 bids for the construction of the project. The lowest responsive bid was from All American Asphalt. Staff also received competitive bids for materials testing, geotechnical services, and surveying services. The total recommended project cost for the project, including all the services mentioned, is $2,774,654. The engineer's estimate for the project was $2.9 million, and the budget for the project is $3.2 million. The project includes some traffic calming measures that are a result of public input from nearby homeowners and businesses and received the support of the Traffic Improvement Subcommittee. Staff is also recommending utilizing project savings of $150,000 to add additional curb and gutter as well as landscape in the public areas at the corner of Camino Capistrano and Doheny Park Road, as well as along the northern edge of Camino Capistrano east of Doheny Park Road. And I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of staff? Okay. Any public comments? Thank you. Ms. Sandy Iverson? Welcome.
Good evening, Council. Sandy Iverson, Capistrano Beach. This is more of a thank you public comment. And I'm a member of Capo Cares, which has become a really great advocate for what's going on in Capistrano Beach, as I know we've come before you before. And I want to express my support for the road improvements, traffic calming measures, and the proposed landscaping improvements along Camino Capistrano between that Doheny Park Road and Via Cañon as you head up the hill to the Palisades. As you know, this is one of the major entrances to our community and has been neglected for a long time. The removal of dedication along the strip was a huge improvement, but we would like to see attractive landscaping along this road, bringing this important arterial roadway up to the standards of the rest of the city. Not only will this create a welcome improvement from the seedy appearance of the current easements, but it will create essentially a linear park, which will be enjoyed by the residents of Doheny Village, particularly those people living across the street at the mobile home park, which has become upgraded in the last year. We want to thank Matt Davenport. He's president of Monarch Environmental Landscaping Company in Doheny Village. He donated pro bono drought-tolerant landscape concept for this area. This will be a significant improvement that will not only beautify the area, but also reduce the amount of water needed to maintain it. We also support the traffic calming measures along Camino Capistrano and thank our fellow member Larry Robinson, who's a local business owner in Doheny Village. He spearheaded the community effort to reduce the speeds for the children who attend the 3 schools along that road. In addition, we urge city staff to continue their efforts to lobby Caltrans to improve the hillside below the freeway, which currently contains dead trees and shrubbery that encroaches on fencing behind the city easement. Big thanks also to Code Enforcement Officer Ted Harris, who got the cars towed behind AMCO, which was in the city property, and those had been there for months and months and looked so bad and derelict at this intersection. So even though AMCO still looks bad on the Doheny Park Road side, we've made progress. These improvements, plus a proposed beautification project, will transform a former eyesore into a safe and attractive entrance into Capistrano Beach. It's not a lot, but it's a start, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Then I will close the public comment portion. Any questions? Okay. This recommended action has been broken down into 6 distinct subparts. So if we could deal with them individually so that it's clearly understood what we're approving and what we're doing up here. I do have questions on the contract documents. If I could, Mr. Munoz. First, I'd like to know, is this contract our standard contract? It's a contract agreement for annual roadway resurfacing project fiscal year 2016-2017. I noticed paragraph 1 is not dated, and it's not signed. So I'm assuming it's a form, and I wanted to know, are we starting with the city's form contract?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I have a couple questions about it. I notice there's no attorney's fees clause in the contract. Is that standard for our contracts?
It depends on any given contract. In some cases, for policy reasons, we'll have an attorney fee provision. In other cases, we won't. It's up to staff if they think. What you want to look at is it more advantageous for the city to not have an attorney fee contract or to have the attorney fee clause, I should say, or to not have the attorney fee clause? In a situation where we have a higher bargaining position, we're really better off sometimes to not have it because it discourages people from suing in the hope that they may be able to recover attorney's fees.
But if we don't have one and we wind up in litigation, we can't recoup fees either, is that correct?
That's correct as well.
And then I want to look at page, let's see, the first contract page, Article 3. Now, the way I interpret this from the 4th line from the bottom on that Article 3, it says, and all other unknown or risks of any description connected with the work. So the way I interpret this, and if you could tell me, please, if this is correct, the contractor is assuming all risks in terms of the money being paid. So,
can you point out what page you're on for me?
Yeah, I'm on the first page of the contract, Article 3.
It's page 6.
Page 6 of item 15.
Thanks. Okay, I apologize. I'm with you now.
Sure. And I guess Article 10, the next page, Article 8, relates to my question on this Article 3. Article 3 seems to say, okay, the contract is for $2,212,212, and that the contractor agrees to accept that price, and that will include any and all unknowns or risks of any description connected with the work. But then when you go to Article 10, we're talking about if the contract involves digging trenches or other excavations that extend deeper than 4 feet, now you get down to agency, being us, will promptly investigate the conditions, and if it's determined that that will decrease or increase the contractor's costs, that we will issue a change order. So my question is, as long as we're 4 feet and above, that's the contractor's risk.
Correct.
And below 4 feet, we now assume some risk that we're going to have to do a change order and pay more money for this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What is the likelihood, given the scope of work, that we're going to go 4 feet or more?
That's really a question for Public Works, if I could ask Mr. Denny.
Unlikely.
Okay. Okay, because, you know, I just want to make sure if I'm approving a contract with $2,212,212, that that's in fact what I'm approving. Because this change order section in 10 is very open-ended. It just says we shall issue a change order. There's no upper bound. It doesn't say an amount not to exceed, although I see in the staff report on page 4, we have a contingency. So what I'd like to see in the contract is saying that we shall issue change orders, but not to exceed our contingency. Can we do that?
You could do that,
Uh-huh.
but as a practical matter, if you end up needing a change order, then you have to bring the contract back for further council approval, which could be problematic if you're in the middle of a project.
Well, if we put a not to exceed the $442,442, you wouldn't have to bring it back unless it exceeds our contingency, correct?
That's true. That's correct.
Because I'm concerned about, okay, we put in a contingency, but it's not really a contingency if it's not bounded in the contract.
I mean, that's a policy call, and it's certainly something you could do.
Okay. So, I think that was all my questions on the contract, which is the first item. Does anybody else have any questions on the contract? Okay. So can I have a motion regarding just the first sub-item of approving this contract?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Let me say, I'd like to make the motion, please, because I'd like to throw in my conditions. So I'm making a motion that we approve this contract with the changes that Article 10 state that the change orders will not exceed $442,000, which is our contingency. And that there is an attorney's fees clause in the contract. Unless you see more risk for us to have a contract that allows us to get our fees back if we have to sue them.
Well, there is an attorney fee provision in here as it relates to their indemnity obligations. So, and that's where the real risk comes up in the event that there's a problem with the construction. In terms of the contract between us and them, construction contracts, there are many very good contractors. So I don't want to defame anybody or let anybody that's in the contracting business think I'm defaming them, but there is a notorious reputation out there for some contractors to operate through change orders and delay damages and to try and immediately upon entering into a contract to start setting up a record to come after a public entity for those kinds of things. There's a whole body of construction law that comes into play in these issues. And if you have an attorney fee provision in there, sometimes those kinds of actors are encouraged to bring those kinds of cases where they might otherwise not if they can recover their attorney's fees. And it's truly a policy call for the construction management team as to whether they think it makes sense or not to have that kind of provision in there. We approve contracts as to form in situations like this. We're not involved in negotiating them. If Public Works staff feels as though it's something that they'd like to have added in there, we certainly aren't opposed to that. You just have to appreciate the risks, and that's one of the kind of long-standing risks that exist, which kind of gets taken into account in these contracts.
I guess my concern is we're not likely to breach because we're only paying money. They, however, are performing services. If they breach and we have to sue, we get no no fees. So I'm just weighing the risks of them.
We have bonds to ensure their performance, so we have lots of surety to
Okay.
ensure that they have to comply. We have leverage. The flip side is if they, start setting up a delayed damage type of a claim, then are they going to be encouraged to do that? If you end up, remember, you're dealing with the lowest responsible bidder. And so sometimes that can be someone that you might not have, at an arm's length transaction, chosen to do business with. So again, it's just it's a policy call. I'm certainly not opposed to it if you want to add that provision. It'd be very easy to add in if the contractor's agreeable to it.
I understand from the staff report, though, we've done business with them before, yes? And we've been satisfied with their work?
Yes.
Well,
It's
with
my
that,
understanding we don't have a history of litigation in this type of work.
okay, well, with that proviso, then I would make my motion that we approve the contract entitled Contract Agreement for Annual Roadway Resurfacing Project Fiscal Year 2016-2017 with the addition of not to exceed our $442 contingency amount in Article 10.
About that. Doesn't the contingency say that any part of this, there's a 20% contingency where if there's a change order up to that, you can go ahead and pay that without coming to us. Anything over that, you have to come back to us for approval anyway?
That is correct.
So isn't what Mayor Lewis is asking for, isn't it already there with the 20% contingency?
I think it's a little redundant to add that language, but it's perfectly okay to add it and be an easy.
Well, I mean, this is our authorization to you.
Well,
correct?
here,
I mean, so putting a contingency in the contract to the contractor, aren't we just saying if you get to the $442,000, we're not going to pay you? Is that what you're trying to say?
no, the contract says that if it's determined that there
Correct.
will be a decrease or increase in the contractor's cost, the city shall, being mandatory, issue a change order under the procedures described in this contract. So the $442,442 is our contingency, but the
But that's what-
contractor is not beholden to our contingency unless it's in the contract. Isn't that true?
Matt, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
I guess my question is, as soon as you get to $442,000, you have to come back to us to ask for authorization to spend more. The contractor, if he finds that there's a problem and he has to go down and the cost goes up to $500,000, he's not going to just charge us $442,000 because that's the max in the contract. He's going to look at it and say, I can't complete this work. What if it's another $100,000 or $500,000? I mean, I'm trying to understand what value that has in the contract, because usually a contingency is at anything over 10%, we got to go back.
Okay, well.
I guess I'm misunderstanding what you're looking for in there, because I think we're looking at spending authority right now.
I'm looking at approving a contract. My concern, and if that's not a valid concern, just let me know. My concern is that this contract, which is the obligation between the city and the contractor, says that we shall issue a change order. It does not have an upper limit as to how much that change order will or will not be. It doesn't say anything about the $442,000. That is between the city manager who will sign the contract and the city council, but not as to the contractor. That's my understanding, and maybe that's incorrect.
Well, change orders can come into play in multiple areas. We can just ask for a change order, and because something changed out there that hadn't been contemplated, and they get paid for that if we ask for it. In the shall language that we're talking about here, these are for the unknown physical conditions. If you have a unknown physical condition that comes up that's so significant that it's going to exceed the contingency, we're going to be back talking to the council about it. I mean, likely you're going to have design changes that are going to go into it, and it'll be a significant issue.
Yes, you'll be back talking to the council, but where in the contract does it say we aren't obligated to pay that?
We don't,
It's just set.
we don't pay it if they don't do the work. And so if we run into a condition where we go, whoa, nobody thought about this and we have to do a redesign, if you have a $1 million addition to this contract because of some unknown underground physical condition, they don't just get to go do it. It's not they don't have to go forward.
I think I understand what she's saying now. I think I just got it.
Okay, if you can assure me that when we don't sign a change order for something in excess of $442,442 and we're still not on the hook for it, then, I'm okay. But
We do not sign the change order.
I think what she's saying is, what if they just came back with, they didn't come to us and say, hey, we've got a problem here. They just did the work and said, you owe us $500,000.
because it increased, decreased,
Because whatever.
differing conditions,
There was something in there, and they just went ahead and did it because it said, you shall issue the change. I think I understand what she's saying now. They could just come back and say, here's your change order, it's $500,000, pay it.
And they don't get to do that. That's not the way, they don't have a right to do that under the contract.
But I think that's what she's concerned about, the shall language, that it just says, we'll do it. If you issue us a change order and it's in these parameters, we'll just pay it. I think that's what she's getting at. And I
Yes,
think
that is exactly what I'm saying.
That's what it took me a while to get there. Okay, I got it.
That is exactly what I'm saying. So here's how I see it. If that's superfluous, then let's just put it in and I'll feel better.
That was sort of my feeling.
No, I just wanted to understand why it was there. I get it now.
I support that idea, so.
Okay, so here's my motion to approve the construction contract entitled Contract Agreement for Annual Roadway Resurfacing Project Fiscal Year 2016-2017 with the addition that the work shall issue a change order under the procedures described in this contract, but not to exceed $442,442.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any debate, more debate on that? Thanks. Okay. Okay, the motion to approve the contract as, with that addition of the $442,442 not to exceed in Article 10 has been approved 5-0. Okay, so the next recommended item is to approve award of a contract to All American Asphalt for construction of the annual residential roadway resurfacing project fiscal year 16-17, and authorize the city manager or his designee to sign and administer the subject contract and approve additional payment for change orders, contingencies, management services, soils and material testing, surveying, and construction design support for the project as noted in the fiscal impact section. Do I have a motion on that?
I move we approve this as written.
I'll second that.
Any debate? Okay, let's vote. Okay, that item as moved to approve the award of the contract to All American Asphalt has been approved 5-0. The third item, to authorize additional surveying services per the as-needed consultant services agreement with David Evans and Associates per the fiscal impact section. I have a question on that as well, before a motion, if you'd mind. On the staff report, I see that we have $85,000 set aside for that. Right? So, is that what we're authorizing? I don't see that number in our authorization.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's what you're authorizing, per the fiscal impact section.
Okay.
Yeah, the recommendation references the fiscal impact section, so they read them together.
Okay. In that case, I will move that we authorize additional surveying services per the as-needed consultant services agreement with David Evans and Associates per the fiscal impact section. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any debate? Vote on that. Okay, so that motion carries 5-0, and the surveying services in the amount of $85,000 have been approved. Number 4, authorize additional materials inspection and testing services per the as-needed consultant services agreement with GMU Geotechnical and Coastal Geotechnical for geotechnical engineering and materials testing per the fiscal impact section, and that section has us approving $35,000. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that motion.
Any debate? So vote. Approve 5-0 to approve the consultant services agreement with GMU. Next item, authorize the reduction of the expenditure budget by $498,360 for CIP number 1281. If you could please just explain that, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, the adopted budget, as Mark mentioned earlier, is larger than what the actual costs are coming out with all of these responses to our bids. So there's savings at this point in time that we're recommending reducing the project budget that has been approved down to the amount that we're asking you to authorize contracts for. That money then falls down to basically it becomes unspoken for in our capital projects fund.
Great, thank you. I just wanted that clarified for people listening.
And then on the next action, you're going to spend some of it.
Yes. Okay, so do I have a motion to authorize that reduction by $498,360?
I'd motion to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Debate? Vote? Okay, by a vote of 5-0, we will be reducing that expenditure budget for CIP 1281 by $498,360. Last item, establish a new $150,000 budget for landscaping, renovation, beautification project along Camino Capistrano in Doheny Village, next to the portion of the street being resurfaced along the I-5 freeway, and affect the funding as further described in the fiscal impact section. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved. Seconded.
Debate? Vote? Well, 5-0. You will get your beautification. It was a lot of work for it, but we did it. Thank you. Okay, on to item 16. Adoption of a resolution approving a notice of completion for the construction of the Del Obispo Street arterial roadway resurfacing project fiscal year 15-16. Staff report, please.
The title you just read is half of my staff report, and I'll follow that up with and authorize a transfer of $173,320 from that project back to our gas tax fund. Those are restricted monies. That'll be available for future, basically, road projects.
Okay. Do we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Debate? Vote? Wow, we're just Cadillacing now. Okay, what happened?
We didn't vote?
Well, I voted, but
Still there.
okay, where's our IT guy? Okay. Yay. Okay, so we've adopted a resolution of the City Council of the City of Dana Point approving a notice of completion for the construction of the project entitled Del Obispo Street Arterial Roadway Resurfacing Project fiscal year 15-16 by a vote of 5-0. And then you said there was going to then be a transfer of $175,320 in unexpended gas tax funding to the gas tax fund, correct? So do I have a motion to transfer that amount?
To be clear, 173,000, not 175.
I have 175, 320.
Oh, I think it was,
Mine- Okay, mine
yeah,
says,
that's what mine said.
mine says 175.
Oh, mine says 173, 320, so yours is different somewhere.
Okay, so it's 173?
320, yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's nice you throw in an extra $2,000.
Yeah, really.
I'll move to approve that item.
The 173, 320, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Any debate? Okay, let's vote. Okay, so that was 5-0 to transfer $173,320 in unexpended gas tax funding to the gas tax fund. Okay, item 17, recruitments for Planning Commission and Traffic Improvement Subcommittee. Staff report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. The terms of 2 Planning Commission and Traffic Improvement Subcommittee members expire on March 31st this year. So following City Council Policy 302, staff recommends proceeding with the 30-day recruitment for these positions. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions of staff? I'd like a motion on proceeding with recruiting for the are there 2 spots open on the Planning Commission?
2 on planning, 2 on traffic.
2 on planning and 2 on traffic, okay. Motion to recruit.
So moved.
Seconded.
Debate? Vote? Okay, by 5-0, we will direct staff to proceed with the recruitment of Planning Commission members and Traffic Improvement Subcommittee members. And those terms expire in March, is that correct?
Yes, end of March.
In March.
So I will be working with you to schedule the interviews once we get the
Great.
applications in.
Thank you. Item number 18, report on 2016 city prosecutor and code enforcement activities. Any staff report, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. As part of our office's duties with the city, we prosecute criminal misdemeanor code violations of the city's municipal code. It's an unusual thing for a city attorney to do in Orange County. There's only a handful of cities that do it. The genesis of our doing that is that the city found years ago that there are certain cases that just due to court congestion, DAs, resources, and limited ability to handle that weren't getting prosecuted. So in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department, the city came to a conclusion that having the city attorney also serve as its city prosecutor, instead of having the DA handle those cases, would be a positive thing to do. The result is that many cases that would not be filed by the district attorney, would not be prosecuted, are now being prosecuted. In working with the Sheriff's Department, we routinely get very positive feedback that we are basically holding people accountable, that there will be a consequence when a sheriff's deputy goes out and writes somebody a citation. Oftentimes, in particular with the people who are the repeat offenders, you're dealing with a segment of society that really doesn't really care about citations. I mean, they literally sometimes will wad them up and throw them down on the ground right in front of a sheriff's deputy. So knowing that there's a consequence, especially in those kinds of cases, is very important, and it provides the deputies with confidence that they don't feel like they're just wasting their time if they go out and start scratching tickets, as they call it, and it really encourages them to provide a higher level of enforcement of our municipal codes than will occur in many other cities. Last year, we handled 143 cases. We had a 96% rate of cases where just really through the initial parts of the system, we could achieve a plea bargain or a fine will be paid, and the case will be resolved. We have a very low rate of repeat offenders. About 15% of total cases involve repeat offenders. In those cases, typically we do end up having jail time included in the end results. Last year, we had 58 cases that included a jail sentence. The average ends up being about 10 days, but we ended up with a total of 751 days of jail time imposed on repeat offender type situations. There's a number of sort of serial offenders that the sheriff's deputies are very, very familiar with. People who might just sort of with impunity decide that they're going to sit around on a sidewalk and openly drink beer, for instance, get intoxicated, cause other problems. Knowing that there really is a consequence in those cases has discouraged many of those people from wanting to hang out in Dana Point. There's one gentleman in particular, Mr. Barone, who seems to wander around between various different cities. He came to Dana Point for a while, spent quite a bit of time in jail and left, came back again after a while, spent more time in jail and has left. We don't think that it's a situation where we won't see him again, but we seem to be having a positive impact on his activities as a for instance. In addition to handling criminal prosecutions of cases where we're basically working with the Sheriff's Department, we handle code enforcement cases where we work directly with the Community Development Department and their staff. When we're dealing with the Community Development Department in the typical code enforcement cases, there's a whole sort of quiver of different strategies that are available to us to use. In some cases, it's as simple as a administrative citation that will go out from the Code Enforcement Department that our office, other than just being aware of the case and providing backup, we never really get involved in. In some cases, we'll file civil cases. In some cases, we'll file criminal cases. Typically, we find that filing a criminal case is the most effective way to get enforcement. In particularly egregious cases, we'll file what's called a receivership case. It's a relatively new tool that the courts have provided, that the legislature has provided to us, where a city can go to the courts and bring a petition to appoint a receiver. The receiver will effectively take over the property, has all the rights to manage the property, obtain loans for the property, and will be responsible to bring the property into compliance. Once the compliance is obtained, then the receivership certificate is signed off and approved by the court. The receiver funds his efforts through obtaining loans, basically. The loans are used to cover all the costs and the city's expenses as well. That all gets paid off at the end. The property owner then has the opportunity to either repay all those loans and take responsibility for them. And in cases where that doesn't happen, the properties are put up for sale. And whatever proceeds are left over after all the costs are paid will go back to the property owners. The courts don't like the receivership process to be used on a willy-nilly kind of a basis. They really want us to only use those in particularly egregious cases. So we do reserve that process for those cases. The really nice thing about it is that the city is guaranteed to recover all of its costs. When we go through other abatement avenues, like for instance, if the city just decides it's going to use its own forces to abate a nuisance, we can go and get what's called an abatement warrant, similar to a search warrant. We can go out and abate the nuisance conditions that might exist at a property. Then we can put a lien on the property, but it takes quite a bit of time before we recover our expenses, typically taking a sale of the property or refinancing of the property. So the receivership process is very advantageous from the standpoint of ensuring that the city recovers all its costs. And the other nice thing about it is it takes us out of the middle of it. We're not involved in litigation. We're not getting sued by somebody who's upset about what's going on. In theory, it turns out that in most of the really egregious cases that we get involved in, oftentimes there's also ancillary litigation by people who typically are representing themselves pro per, and none of them have had any success, but it's a bit of a challenge. The good news is that we do recover the legal costs that go along with those ancillary types of litigation if they occur. We have a slide presentation that gives just sort of a flavor of the different types of code enforcement activities that we get involved in, and the different methods that we've used in various ones of those cases. So if you could bring up the first property. This is the Oltman property. You can see from the slides that the property had really fallen into a terrible condition. Can you go to the next slide, please? These are just pictures of what the property looked like before the city got involved. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is what the property looked like after the city's efforts. You can see the cars were taken away, all the junk and material that was in the front yard is gone, the garage door is now closed. This was a situation where we used the abatement warrant process. We went to the courts, we got effectively the equivalent of a search warrant that allowed us to go in and clean up the property. The city staff handled this on their own with their forces, with the exception of the efforts that were necessary to go to court to get the abatement warrant. If we can go to the next property, please. So this is the Finnegan property. The first picture on the left, where you see the fire hydrant, shows a wall that was built on the right-hand side of the property in the city's right-of-way. It was built without permits, and it was built so close to the fire hydrant that the fire hydrant became unusable. The picture on the right-hand side is the left side of the driveway, if you were facing it, showing a wall that was built on the other side of the property as well without permits, also in the city's rights-of-way. If we change to the next slide, please. After the city's efforts were done, this is what the front looked like. It was put back into a condition that complied with city codes and was not interfering with either the fire hydrant or the city's rights-of-way. If we go to the next slide, please. A big problem with the Finnegan property was that there was a landslide in the rear yard. You can see the tarps shown here that were protecting the slope. There was a house up above that was in very serious danger of sliding down the slope. The property owner, on the right-hand side picture, you can see began efforts on his own to repair the wall without getting any city permits, without doing any of the technical engineering that's necessary for this kind of work. And just kind of take note of the wooden framing there that goes along with the concrete repair work. If we can go to the next slide. This is what it looked like after the city got involved through the receivership process. You can see there are very, very extensive retaining walls. The picture on the left shows the right-hand side of the property, and the picture on the right shows the left-hand side of the property. That's the rear retaining wall area. Can we go to the next slide? I think there may be, okay, so on the Finnegan property, just to give you a little bit of flavor of what we end up dealing with sometimes, this started out as a criminal prosecution. It seemed like a reasonable means to get the property owner's attention and get them to come into compliance. And bear in mind, the city's goal in these cases is compliance. I mean, all we want is for people just to kind of follow the rules and do it right. Mr. Finnegan was a particularly stubborn person. He really believed that what he was doing was okay and that he was in the right and the city was in the wrong. We went through a 5-day-long criminal trial, and at the end of the trial, he was found guilty on all counts, put on probation. His probation required him to bring the property into compliance within, I want to say it was 90 days. I can't remember the exact time frame, a reasonable amount of time. He refused to do that. A lot of effort went into trying to get him to comply. Finally, we went to the court with a probation revocation hearing. The judge revoked his probation and made him pay the maximum fines that were authorized under the criminal codes. But she determined that he was just basically refusing to comply. And in the criminal process, you can find him guilty of what he's done in the past, but you can't force him to do something. So the efforts to do something that seemed reasonable and the most cost-effective way to get to the end result didn't pan out in that situation. And so we went forward with a receivership. The courts did appoint a receiver who ended up doing the repair work as part of the process. An award for all the city's costs and receivership's costs and legal fees was entered. If we can go to the next slide. This is a property, you might recognize it in the background there is the kind of the Beach Cities off-ramp coming down the slope there. This is known as the Carnes property. This is a criminal code enforcement action that we're in the middle of right now. The containers that you see on the property are prohibited by our zoning code. They're being utilized as office space, which is also a violation of a variety of various safety-related codes. It's just basically not safe to have people working out of containers. You don't have proper ingress and egress and facilities and those sorts of things. This is a case that's been going on for quite some time. Back in 2004, city staff got involved. There was 3 containers on the property and started trying to obtain compliance. By 2016, there was 9 containers on the property. A great deal of effort went into trying to obtain voluntary compliance, to no avail. And so after literally a year-long effort to try and gain compliance, a criminal case was filed, and that's in process right now. One of the things that occurs is, again, our goal being compliance, is that staff starts out by sending notices and letters, and then if they don't get compliance, then they turn it over to our office, and we start sending letters. The goal is to effectively create a paper trail that's very, very solid to show the court that we've really tried everything, and we're sort of at our wits' end, and so we need the court's assistance in bringing compliance in these cases. So that's why it takes quite a bit of time sometimes to gain compliance. If we go to the next slide, please. This is a series of pictures on a property known as the Patterson property. Pictures don't really do justice necessarily to the level of issues we're dealing with. An inspection of the property revealed all kinds of improper electrical connections that were deemed to be immediate life safety issues. They're fire hazards, basically. All kinds of improper electrical connections. The one in the middle here, where you can see sort of a box with some red and white wires out of it, is the one that Mr. Sutton pointed out to me as particularly dangerous because there's a lot of fuel that could be sparked and create a fire. If we could go to the next slide. The property, the picture on the left there with the red chip clip on it, that's a significant wire that was connected into the panel box without proper permits. These are just sort of miscellaneous pictures showing different things they did. There's a microwave there that was hung sort of, a do-it-yourselfer kind of a project with electricity without any proper permitting or complying with building codes relating to the dangers that might go with an oven. On the right, there's an air conditioning unit that was put in over a window without doing it in a manner that complied with the building code, causing various safety hazards. It looks like a hornet's nest almost in the middle there with the electrical wiring that was exposed on the outside of the building on some light fixtures. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a panel box that was tapped into without proper permitting. The middle picture is just sort of a generalized picture of the kinds of conditions that existed at the house. You can see hanging in the upper right, there's sort of a yellow-looking cord. That's an extension cord that was basically being used to provide power into this room that, this room doesn't even have a door on it. It was sort of it was described as a shanty town in and of itself in this house, and you'll see some more pictures that show the number of sleeping quarters that were illegally constructed. The number one cause of fires in homes are extension cords improperly being utilized and being overloaded. Mr. Sutton thought this was a particularly good picture that shows that kind of overload. If we go to the next picture, next slide. This again is just sort of a compilation of pictures showing the conditions at the house and just sort of the unsanitary kind of interior conditions. And people were living in these conditions. You might note the water heater was relocated to the outside of the house. It's not strapped down. It's not properly vented. It's a very, very serious fire hazard and a hazard if there was an earthquake to cause gas leaks and other kinds of fire dangers. If we can go to the next slide. This is more pictures of different areas of the house. The far right picture is a sleeping quarters that was created in the garage area, very unsanitary and not proper habitable conditions. We can go to the next slide. Again, this is just generalized pictures of the kinds of junk and nuisance conditions that existed at the property. Piles of bicycles, automobiles that were effectively abandoned and in different states of disrepair. If you look at that middle lower picture where you see all kinds of household chemicals in the garage, and that's a tremendous fire hazard, especially when you combine it with the overloaded circuits that existed in the house and the improper wiring and electrical connections. If we go to the next slide. So that concludes the Patterson pictures. That's a case where we filed a receivership. After we filed the receivership, but before we got too far into it, a new owner came along and bought the property. All of the junk that you see in all these pictures has been cleaned up by the new owner. They've asked us, to cooperate with them, and they're cooperating with us to hold off on pursuing the receivership. They feel as though they can fix the property far cheaper on their own than if they have to incur the costs that are involved with the city doing it, which is what we encourage. They did, in exchange for our agreement to hold off, reimburse the city for all of the costs that it incurred in the process. They're in the final stages of permitting to be able to remedy all of the building and safety code violations that existed at the property. And as I said, all the junk and debris has been removed. Going to the next slide, the next property. This is the Doheny Village area. This picture just depicts basically business being, occurring outside, which is not permitted by our code. If we go to the next slide. Generally, what we're seeing at this location is just sort of unsightly, unsanitary conditions, a lot of junk and trash on the ground as depicted by these pictures. If we can go to the next slide. These are just more pictures showing the general condition of the area. On the upper right corner, there's a picture of a boarded up shop. It's boarded up with white paper in the windows, which is unsightly and not permitted by our code. The middle picture shows a broken window, literally reflective of the broken window theory we heard about earlier. And then down below in the bottom right corner, you see just some very unsightly tarps that were put up in the area. So can we go to the next slide, please? The upper left slide, you'll see there's just, that is peanut oil, used peanut cooking oil that was just placed out on the ground. It's technically a hazardous contaminant that has to be handled properly and disposed of properly. It's one of the ongoing problems that we see out at the site. The bottom left picture shows that there's so much debris at the property that we're having trash building up at the storm drains, which is a significant problem, not only from ocean water quality standpoints, but also with the very strict NPDES permitting requirements that now exist that we're being forced to enforce and comply with and face fines if we don't do that. So we take this kind of stuff very seriously. And again, these pictures just sort of give a general flavor of what it looks like and the unsightliness of the property. This is a property that is in the city process yet. It hasn't been turned over to our office. It's one that code enforcement's on top of and trying to bring compliance before it gets worse than the current conditions. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is the Amico location. The problem that was occurring out here is that there was a lot of cars they're inoperable vehicles. They're considered abandoned, although they are under the control of the location, it appears. Many of the cars were being parked on the city's right-of-way, and so the first step of what we did is using the vehicle code, went and after giving various notices, plenty of time, several notices were given. Finally, we let them know that at the beginning of the year we'd start towing cars, which we did within the city's rights-of-way. One of the things that they did is they pushed the vehicles, or some of the vehicles that hadn't been towed, up onto their property and off the city's rights-of-way. And so now we're going through the next phase, which is identifying the vehicles that are inoperative and effectively abandoned, unregistered, that sort of thing. It's not permissible to store cars like that out in the open on lots like this. So the next step is that those cars will be towed if they don't get removed voluntarily. If we flip through these pictures real quickly, you just kind of get a feel for, if we go to the next slide, please. This is sort of what it looked like out there. Can you go back one for a second? If you look along the kind of coming straight back from the wall of the building towards where the white pickup truck is, that's all in the city's rights-of-way. If you go to the next slide, and maybe skip ahead one more slide. So that picture where you see the palm tree in the foreground and you can see back to the building, that's that same location I was pointing out a moment ago. And you can see there's a very actually well-defined city right-of-way there where cars had been parked and they've now been removed. And so that leads us now to phase 2 that I was talking about, where the cars that are kind of back tucked in behind the tree will be the next cars that will be targeted. This is, again, an example of using the city's process, cooperation between code enforcement and the sheriff's department to work together to solve an issue. Our involvement's really limited in these cases to sort of just backup advice and counseling. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is the Pickering property that there was actually some discussion about earlier tonight down in Doheny Village. This has effectively become a shanty town. There are multiple businesses operating without proper permits for multiple businesses. If you look at the picture where the boats are, you can see that those are storage containers with tarp over them to create workspace underneath, as opposed to having an appropriate building. If I'm not mistaken, the picture on the left, you can see in the background is the back of a storage container, and then up above is a storage container that was stacked across the first storage container. There's been multiple situations out there where there's been stacking of storage containers, and they've been tilting and creating a real dangerous situation. The area came to the attention of code enforcement because of a fire that occurred due to the overloading of electrical circuits. The picture on the left sort of shows a typical view of what some of the various different businesses' workspaces look like. We can go to the next slide. In the middle of the picture on the left, you can see a power box that has all kinds of electrical connections running out of it. The problem is they don't have proper electrical paneling, which is what resulted in them having the fire in the first place that led to the code enforcement department's intervention here. The picture on the right is just, more kind of typical of what we're seeing down there. We can go to the next slide. Again, these are more pictures of just kind of showing the kinds of materials that are just sort of stacked and piled in various areas. We can go to the next slide. Oh, is that it? So in connection with the Pickering situation, staff's been working on this property since 2010. They had a very difficult time getting compliance. After they asked us to go ahead and file a criminal prosecution, compliance has now started to come into shape. The property owners currently are working with the city cooperatively towards identifying the various things that need to be done, inventorying all the properties out there, figuring out what needs to be done towards compliance. So through that criminal code enforcement process, we're having some success bringing this one around. And this is a good example of a very large property right in the heart of Doheny Village area. So that's just sort of a summary of what we've been doing in the last year. The criminal prosecution cases don't have good sexy pictures to put up with them, but you get a feel for what we're doing with the code enforcement side from the pictures we've shown. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. I do have a question. How were these properties selected for this procedure? And if residents have problems with businesses or residents in their area, how do they get the city to embark on the process?
We use what's called a complaint-driven process. Our code enforcement officers don't just drive around looking for issues, although they could, but they have enough business with complaints they get. So once we get a complaint, it gets logged into the system. Code enforcement officers will go out and take a look at it, and depending on the nature of the complaint, either the sheriff's department will handle it or code enforcement, or sometimes a combination of both. So if citizens have complaints, they should contact the code enforcement department. I don't know if there's a direct number for that, Ursula.
I'm not off the top of my head aware of the direct number. If you call community development, they can get you over to code enforcement. Go to the city's website and you can find the information as well.
I do know we have a direct number. It's on the website. I apologize. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Sorry to put you on the spot, Ursula. I thought you might know.
Okay. Well, we can get that if anybody wants that and make that announcement. And then is there a goal that's set for code enforcement between the time that someone makes a complaint and the time that that complaint is addressed by code enforcement?
We do have performance metrics for code enforcement, and their annual review process looks at what those performance metrics are and their performance against them. Yes, we are looking also to moving toward a more case management process. That's a little bit of something that's being introduced in the more recent time period that we think will be helpful to the code enforcement officers to have somebody specifically running reports and sending out ticklers and reminders for follow-up. It's something we do want to improve on.
And is that metric something that the public can see so they can see the process and the timely response?
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, actually. I think we'll go ahead and just put those on our website under the code enforcement area.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have questions of staff on the staff report? Okay, do I have, let's see, the recommended action is that the city file and receive the update of the city prosecutor and code enforcement activities. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any debate? Vote, please. By a 5-0 vote, that city prosecutor and code enforcement activities report is now filed. Next item, item 19, city council appointed representatives and city commissions, committees, subcommittees, and task forces. Staff report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the first city council meeting of the year, staff brings a report to council for the appointments of committee assignments to outside agencies and also appointments to the internal committees, subcommittees, et cetera. I've highlighted all of the committees that Carlos and Scott were on to assist in your discussion, and I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. And the process, I understand it, is that we go through each of these agency committees and get a motion and a second for the individual representative and an alternate if appropriate. Is that correct?
Correct, and you may, if you so choose, if there's no changes to some of them, you can approve them in a block at a time and just do the ones that have particular changes for Scott or Carlos in as separate individual motions.
Okay. Well, I would move that everyone that says mayor, mayor pro tem, that we keep those the same. I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any debate? Vote on that? Okay, so by 5-0, everything listed here as mayor and mayor pro tem, we'll just keep those the same. Okay, so let's go on to the next one, Animal Services Subcommittee. If anybody wants to volunteer for these, in effect nominate themselves, I think that'll move the process along more quickly. Do I have anybody who wants to do Animal Services?
I'd be interested in that, Madam Mayor.
Great. Okay, so, and I would second that. Any debate on that? So let's vote.
An alternate.
Yes, I was gonna, okay, we can do the alternate. All right, does anybody want to be alternate? No interest? All right, well, why don't we,
Then we'll make it somebody I can appoint in case.
Sure.
Okay, how's that?
If you can't make it, let us know, we'll find somebody.
Okay.
Okay, so vote on Mr. Tomlinson for the Animal Services Subcommittee?
You can, I guess.
Can we, hold on, there must be a question.
I don't recall exactly what the JPA agreement reads with CASA, and if we have to have a specifically designated alternate, but at a minimum, I would suggest that you make it formal in your motions. We have it in the minutes that it's Mr. Tomlinson or his designee, so at least we have something if he can't show up.
With his designee being a council member.
Yes, a council member.
Okay, so therefore, I will amend my motion to nominate Mr. Tomlinson as our representative on the Animal Services Committee, and the alternate being his designee being a city council member. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, now we can vote. Okay, so, Mr. Tomlinson, congratulations. By a vote of 5-0, you are our Animal Services Subcommittee representative. Capistrano Unified School District.
Joint powers.
Oh, sorry. Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Mr. Vizorek, you're currently on there. Would you like to continue?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll continue. Thank you.
And I see that we have an alternate in Mr. Schofield. Do we have someone who's interested in being an alternate? Can we do the same?
I'll do it.
You'll do it?
Yeah.
Good man. Okay, so I make a motion that Mr. Vizorek be the representative and Mr. Tomlinson his alternative on the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Second?
I'll second that.
Vote. By a vote of 5-0, Mr. Vizorek is the representative and Mr. Tomlinson the alternate on the Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Okay, now, Capistrano Unified School District. Mr. Miller, do you have a desire to continue?
Sure.
Because if you don't, I will be happy to do that.
You know what, I do enjoy that one, but if you want it. If you want it, you can have it. I enjoy.
Would you like to be the
There's actually
alternate?
two. There's not alternates. There's two appointees to it.
Oh, okay, well, there we go. Okay, so I motion that Mr. Miller and myself, Ms. Lewis, be the representatives for Capistrano Unified School District.
I'll second that.
Okay, vote. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, myself and Mr. Miller will be the two representatives for Capistrano Unified School District. Okay, City Selection Committee was a mayor designee. Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor. Mr. Miller, would you like to continue on that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment on this. Foothill Eastern and San Joaquin, the two committees meet simultaneously, and about 90% of the work they do is the same. But I think it's important, we have two different designees, but I think whoever the primary is, or the director is, should be the alternate on the opposite boards, because that way if somebody misses, you still have a vote. That happened to us last year when Mr. Schoeffel missed, and I was not his alternate, so I couldn't vote.
Okay, so if I'm hearing, you're suggesting that the representative of one and the alternate of that same one be the reverse on the San Joaquin?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I've experienced that as well, too, so I think it's best to have two people do it and the alternate for the one be the lead for the other. I think that's a great idea.
Fine. Okay, so Mr. Miller, you would like to continue serving on the Foothill Eastern and then the alternate on the San Joaquin?
Yes.
Okay, so we need an alternate on the Foothill and a primary on the San Joaquin. Does anyone have?
All service in both those roles, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion?
Seconded.
Okay, so the motion is for Mr. Miller to be the representative of the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor with Mr. Vizorek as his alternate, and for Mr. Vizorek to be the representative of the San Joaquin Transportation Corridor, and Mr. Miller his alternate. Vote on that. Okay, League of Cities, Ocean Institute. Okay, Orange County Council of Governments, this is something I would like to serve on. I understand you're on that. Do you have any objection if I serve on that one, Mr. Miller?
Well, no, I don't. Actually, I'll stay the alternate if you'd like, since I've been on it, but unless somebody else
Okay.
wants it. The only thing I'd recommend is if you want OCOG, SCAG, is they meet at the same time.
Okay.
And they meet out in the desert, so just kind of a nice trip.
Out in the desert?
Yeah, they always meet out in the desert every year. And so, that's fine. If you
Okay.
want to do one, you should probably do both.
All right, so I'll take those two. And do you want to be the alternate on both?
Sure, unless somebody else wants it.
Does anybody else? Don't all jump, yeah. Okay, so the motion is for Ms. Lewis to serve as the representative of the Orange County Council of Governments and the Southern California Association of Governments, and for Mr. Miller to be the alternate on both. Second?
Second.
Vote on that. think that said 5-0. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, that motion passes. Okay, we're down Orange County Fire Authority. Mr. Miller, you're on that. Would you like to continue on that? Alternate has been eliminated. So the motion is for, to nominate Mr. Miller as the representative for the Orange County Fire Authority. Do I have a second?
Second.
Debate? Vote?
No, I think he's done a great job, so I hope he stays on, so.
Okay,
And he does.
good. By a vote of 5-0. Okay, Orange County Library Advisory Board, Mr. Miller, you're the alternate. Would you like to move up?
I think that was definitive.
Well said. Okay, do we have any volunteers? We have some people here. Okay, what do we do if,
I'll tell you.
The interest
I'm
is
just
not-
going to make a plea for one of you guys to take it, only because that is a relatively interesting advisory board because of the same, it has the same equity issues that Fire Authority does. And so you get into some really kind of interesting conversations. I'm surprised Mr. Wojciechowski hasn't actually. Have you shown up there and talked to those guys? But, yeah, it's okay.
I can take that. Can you continue as the alternate? You're the alternate now, or, I mean, it's up to you, but.
okay, so.
Make sure you don't miss.
I'll do my very best. I live close.
Is that a condition of the motion here? Okay. All right, so I make a motion that Mr. Wyatt be the representative for the Orange County Library Advisory Board and Mr. Miller an enthusiastic alternate. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any debate? Comments? Vote? Okay, by a vote of 5-0, congratulations. Mr. Wyatt is the representative and Mr. Miller the alternate for the Orange County Library Board. Okay, next, Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District. I have any bug people?
I'll volunteer, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Vizorek, do I have I will second that. Debate? Vote on that, please. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, Mr. Vizorek is the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District, is our representative from Dana Point. We've taken care of the San Joaquin Transportation Corridor. Now we're into Paul's bailiwick, the water. So South Coast Water District, are you interested in that, Paul?
Yes, I will take it.
Then I will move that Mr. Wyatt, and we need an alternate. Oh, it's a second, okay. Do we have a second person who wants to serve on the South Coast Water District?
I'll take it.
Okay. Okay, so I make a motion that Mr. Wyatt and Mr. Tomlinson be the two representatives to the South Coast Water District on the Water and Sewer Committee. Do I have a vote? Second? Vote, please. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, Mr. Wyatt and Mr. Tomlinson are the two representatives on the South Coast Water District. We've got the South Coast Association of Governments, South Coast Association of Mayors, South Orange County Watershed Management Area Partners. Again, Mr. Wyatt, I understand that's something you're interested in?
Yes, I would be willing to take that.
Okay, and we need an alternate.
I
Anybody want-
nominate Mr. Denny. He's already listed on there, correct?
Okay, yeah, can we have a non-city council alternative, is that okay?
Mr. Denny, do you know?
Yeah, it's my understanding that there is one policy member from each member as well as one staff
Okay,
that serves as the alternate.
Would you like to do that, Mr. Denny?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
okay. Yeah. Congratulations, you've been nominated. Okay, so I make a motion that Paul Wyatt serve as the representative of the South Orange County Watershed Management Area Partners, and Mr. Denny, the alternate.
Second.
Any debate? Vote, please. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, Mr. Wyatt is the representative and Mr. Denny the alternate to the South Orange County Watershed Management Area Partners. Okay, the next group then is consider appointments to city committees, subcommittees, and task forces. That's action document B. So the ad hoc committee, and speaking with the acting city attorney, Mr. Killebrew, I understand that that committee is no longer going to be convened. Is that correct?
The Destiny Committee has not.
The Destiny ad hoc.
Has not met since, I believe, June of 2013.
Okay, so
So
we
it's
will
been a while.
remove that.
That's, if the city council wants to move it, I could suggest a motion and a second to eliminate.
Okay.
Yes, I move that we eliminate that committee.
And I will second that. Any debate on that? Let's vote. Okay, by a vote of 5-0, the Dana Point Destiny Ad Hoc Committee has been eliminated. Disaster Council Mayor is, what's that? Yeah, that's, okay. That's okay. I do that myself. Okay, Homeless Task Force, Mr. Wyatt, is that something you were interested in?
Yes, I would like to take that.
And an alternate? Do we have an alternate?
I'll do that.
Okay. Okay, so I move that Mr. Wyatt serve as the representative of the Homeless Task Force and Mr. Tomlinson serve as his alternate. Do I have a second? Any debate? Vote? Okay, 5-0. Mr. Wyatt is the representative and Mr. Tomlinson is the alternate on the Homeless Task Force. I'm going to come back to the Financial Review Committee. Okay, Ocean Water Quality Subcommittee, Mr. Wyatt, is that something you'd like to serve on?
Yes, in sort of keeping all the water stuff together, I think it would make sense to do that. I know.
Okay, so I move that Mr. Wyatt be designated as our representative for the Ocean Water Quality Subcommittee. Do I have a
Second that.
debate? Vote? Okay, so by a vote of 5-0, Mr. Wyatt is the Ocean Water Quality Subcommittee Council representative. So I'd like to come back to the Financial Review Committee. I do have some thoughts on that. I would like to, currently this is a committee that basically just looks at our investment. And I'd like to see this committee revamped as a Financial Oversight Watchdog Committee to be staffed with 5 members of the public, appointed 1 member by each city council, each of the city council members, to serve at our pleasure and no longer than the term of the city council member. And its function would basically be oversight of the financial, to look into it and make staff reports. So that's what I would like to do. I will make that motion, and then if there's a second, we can debate that. So I'm moving to revamp the currently configured Financial Review Committee so that hereafter it will be a standing committee, meeting no more often than once a month with the city manager, or in this case, acting city manager, unless 4 members vote to meet less often, but at least meeting once a quarter. The purpose of the committee will be to serve as the Public Financial Watchdog Committee and to submit reports to the City Council after each meeting. The committee will consist of 5 members of the public who live full-time in Dana Point, with each council member appointing 1 committee member to serve at the council member's pleasure, but no longer than that council member's city council term. Council approval will not be required for any city council member's appointment. Each committee member will be given access to financial information reasonably requested to carry out the committee's purpose, other than any attorney-client privileged information, at least a week before its regularly scheduled meeting, and the council members will each email to Mr. Killebrew the name of their appointed member by February 7th, with the committee meeting its first meeting by February 28th. And just as a caveat, I have had lengthy discussions with Mr. Killebrew on this matter, and he is very amenable to this. So just wanted to let everybody know.
Mayor
So that-
Lewis, could I make a couple suggestions?
Yes.
In order to make this kind of a change, assuming there's council support for it, I think we should bring back at your next meeting a resolution, because we have to amend existing resolutions that establish the current process, as well as the, is it the investment policy statement that calls for some of these things? I mean, it's a relatively simple thing to do. It's just a matter of crossing the Ts and dotting the Is.
Okay.
And secondly, I think for the sake of having a clean record on this, rather than just emailing Mr. Killebrew, I think that each council member should just, as a consent calendar item, just, I need to think how we would do it, but just somehow to make sure it's in our records as a consent calendar item, that the person is sort of formally blessed by the council as being the official designee. It's awkward if you just have emails flying back and forth. If it's something that's formally approved by the council, it's perfectly okay to say that you don't need other council support if you have the, the ability to appoint your person, but we should just make it a consent calendar item if that's the pleasure of the council.
If you'd like to email me the names, I'll put them all on one consent calendar item.
Okay. So that I understand, though, we need a resolution today.
Well, what we would typically do is, again, assuming there's council support to do this, we'll just bring back a resolution at the next meeting. I mean, you can effectively debate it
Okay.
tonight and sort of make a motion to say this is what you want.
Okay.
And we would bring back a resolution on the consent calendar next time to have the formal documentation to reflect what it is that you're talking about doing.
Okay, very good. So my motion
I would
will be
like to
voted on.
I would also like to point out that if you're going to make regularly scheduled meetings, that might help me remember who's on the committee as well.
Okay. Very good.
I do have one question. I know that Larry Rollap's part of this committee. Is he a resident of Dana Point, or is he not? Do we
Yes,
know?
he is a resident.
Okay, that would be my one concern, is that,
As is Andrew DePrimio.
Good.
Good. So that is my motion. Do I have a second?
I've got a question.
Sure.
So are we only, there's going to be a total of 5 members?
Yes.
So Mr. Rolap or I can't remember the other gentleman's.
Andrew DePrimio.
If we don't, if one of us doesn't select them, they're no longer on this committee?
That's correct.
Correct. All right. And what is this, tell me again what you want this committee to do. It sounds different from what they do today.
It is. Now, in talking with Mr. Killebrew, basically today they just look at investments, right? Well, maybe you could just tell us.
The history of this goes back to the incorporation of the city when the first investment policy was adopted, and it was to look at what the city staff is allowed to invest in. And there are actually limits also under the California Government Code. Subsequent to that, there have been some changes back around 1994 in response to the county's bankruptcy. There was some reconfiguration of this group. And then roll forward to 2006, a new add-on to their charge was to take a look at the Mello-Roos or Community Facilities District that was set up for the Headlands project. And then in the last 2 years here, there was a proposal that was brought forward by the Zephyr Project for something that was similar. It was also during that time the formal name of the committee was changed from the Investment Review Committee to the Financial Review Committee. And that's where we're at today. And just for the record, also, I do support a citizen group appointed by the council to take a look at the city's finances. It's good to have more people looking at the details. I've always been supportive of these types of approaches to things, and for the regularly scheduled meetings again. So.
Great.
And so I understand there, so this new group, are they going to make recommendations to the council? I mean, what, because the Financial Review Committee actually changed our financial document and made changes to it. Is this new committee going to have the same authority to do that and then bring it back to the council for approval? I mean, I'm trying to understand what it is. I mean, I'm not saying I'm against this. I think it's probably a good idea. I'm just trying to understand what's happening.
I envision it as a public financial watchdog. They would make reports, review, make reports. They can make recommendations, but ultimately it's the city council's purview.
Sure. So they would act same way as the Financial Review Committee acts today,
Right.
but with additional abilities to take a look at other financials in the city and, okay, cool.
I mean, from my point of view, you know, this is not my expertise. And
No, I
so
get
we have people out here who have a lot of expertise on this, and they have expressed a desire to be involved. And so I would encourage people
No, I mean, I
to
think
be
it's,
engaged.
I think it's a great idea. I was just trying to understand exactly what this group was going to do, if they were not going to act as our Financial Review Committee and not be able to make those change or recommendations. I just want to understand.
If I could chime in, one of the things that happened in the last year and a half was the Financial Review Committee had discussed financial reporting, and the quarterly reports that we're producing now came out of those discussions. So they've slowly been evolving into, I think, what the mayor's proposing today. And again, I support what it's going in this direction with a quote watchdog, if you will. But you know, just more people looking at the details.
Do we need a second for that?
We do.
You have it. Second.
Great. Any other discussion on this debate? Okay,
Yeah.
vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to commend you, Mary Louise, on this idea. I think you caught me on a good night for changing the Financial Review Committee. But I think
Glad to hear that.
this is a really good idea. So I do appreciate you coming forward with these kinds of ideas where you see a problem and we can address it. So I hope that moving forward, the newly constituted Financial Review Committee, if that's what we're going to call it, will meet with the correct people and do the job that we envision it to do. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Again, you know, your appointee serves at your pleasure, so if you're not happy, you have the ability to remove that person.
Also, we can rotate them every meeting.
All right, vote on that, please. Okay, the resolution, or the motion passes by 5-0, and I will direct staff to give us the resolution for the next meeting and put on the consent calendar the names, and I guess the names, are you envisioning that we'll have names from each of the 5 city council by the next meeting so that you can put it on the consent calendar?
If you have the
That's
names,
something
we
you-
can put them on there.
I was to say, is that something?
People may say no.
Or might want
Absolutely.
to think about it a little bit more. So
Okay, so
as soon as we get 3 names, we can bring those forward. So we'd
Okay.
have a quorum.
So why don't we put the resolution on the next agenda for approval, and anybody who has names of people who are willing to do that, we can put those on as well.
Madam Mayor, there is 3 weeks in between this meeting and the next meeting, so it does give a little more time in between.
Okay, very good. Great, thank you. All right. Let's see, where are we now?
I hope you
Let's see, okay.
I believe we have a resolution for the Orange County
Okay,
Fire.
adopt a
Authority.
resolution if necessary entitled, "A Resolution of the City Council of
Madam
the City
Mayor.
of Dana Point, California, designating and appointing its," not
No,
necessary.
that's only if the delegate, who is Councilmember Miller, was changed.
Okay.
He's staying on there, no resolution necessary.
Great. All right, so then, as I see it, we're finished with that item on the agenda? All right. No more public comments?
Correct.
So now we're on to staff reports. Acting City Manager, Mr. Killebrew?
Just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, first of all. Secondly, I believe it's our Chief of Police, Lieutenant Russ Chilton's birthday today, and I want to wish him a happy birthday.
Do we have to sing? don't think you want that.
And he did choose to spend it with us.
Aw. Well, we're honored.
There is no other place I'd rather be than here with the city council. This is important.
Well, right back at you. Okay, was there cake with that?
We're all on a diet.
Wait a minute, I'm not on a diet. Okay, and then, Mr. City Attorney, is there any more report that you have?
I'd just like to announce that the ACCOC is hosting a forum on marijuana and Prop 64 next Tuesday at the Laguna Hills Community Center. Be some interesting speakers on the panel. I'll be one of the panelists if anybody's interested.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I'm now asking each council member for council reports, including city-related meetings attended. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing to report, and I will get my list of meetings to the clerk. And she'll remind me if I don't.
And Mr. Wyatt?
I have nothing to report, and I have given my list of meetings to the clerk.
And as for me, I have nothing to report, and I have given my list of meetings to Ms. Ward. Mr. Vizorek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing to report.
And Mr. Tomlinson?
Well, big happy birthday to Lieutenant Schultzen. Happy birthday, Ross. I would like to point out, I do a fair bit of traveling, and I fly a lot on Southwest Airlines, and there was an article in Southwest magazine that I believe that Ursula and Kelly Renders were responsible for. So it was in, Sean, I'm sorry.
Sean Kay, our DMO Executive Director, all accolades go to him. Yeah.
Okay, well, I can only imagine how many people saw that article in 30 days. It was in the month of December, and, I read it like 5 times, so. So that's great, and I was also in a restaurant having lunch today in my city of Brea where I have my office, and there was a little napkin that said it was talking about some of the things going on in Dana Point. So we're definitely getting noticed in other parts of Orange County. So congratulations to the promotion of our city. And I will get my list of meetings to Madam Clerk.
Thank you. And I'd like to second that. Kudos for that. I read that myself. Okay, let's see. So I guess we're now adjourned. The next regular meeting of the City Council is February 7th, 2017 at 5 o'clock p.m. 5 o'clock p.m.? Okay. 5 o'clock p.m. in the City Council chamber right here. We are adjourned.